What happens when retail workers finally snap? Two women came into the store screaming at each other. As I was coming out from the back, I gather from the yelling that one had nearly hit the other's car. Nearly, but no actual incident had occurred. It was a busy Saturday, people were starting to stare, I was trying to gather my wits, thinking how best to handle it, when my manager came flying in from nowhere. She just yells, "Either come in here and shop like people or go outside with the rest of the animals." One left and one stayed. A bunch of my coworkers quit. I worked at McDonald's in 1997 and we had Beanie Babies as Happy Meal toys at one point. It was insane. They literally had to buy a security cage to keep the toys locked down in the back. They were delivered with a security escort. People were ordering 100 Happy Meals with no food because we couldn't sell the toys by themselves. One day I heard a commotion up front and found my high school counselor reaching across the counter, grabbing one of the owners by the shirt because we were out of the pink flamingo. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. She had to be dragged out. It's scary how easy it can be to work people up into a frenzy. Worked at Radio Shack for 6 months while in college. Pretty much had at least one terrible experience per shift. The one that stands out the most was a guy who wanted us to honor the warranty on his iPhone cable. The thing was a mutilated mess. It had clearly stopped working and he had tried to fix it himself by cutting the cable apart and attempting to solder 2 wire pieces together. We calmly explained that we couldn't process a claim for an item that was willfully destroyed, and he started screaming in our faces about how Radio Shack is a scam, and "I'm going to sue all of you." Then he tries to whip my coworker, a 5-foot-tall, non-threatening woman, with his broken cable. She managed to turn her head and catch the wire with her hand before it caught her in the face. Myself and another employee chased him out of the store and called the police, but nothing came of it. Radio Shack shoppers really were the worst. Oh, my friend, I feel like by the end of this video we'll have plenty of other strong contenders for that title. I know full well from working with the Am I the Jerk channel just how often Karens are prepared to fly into physical assault mode when their retail workers inconvenience them with the truth. So I think this wire whipper is just the gentle tip of the iceberg. I worked at a ski resort when I was younger, fitting boots and sizing skis, among other things, in a ski rental shop. My first year, I worked at basically the Walmart of rentals, the cheapest option and the biggest store. So the week of Christmas, there were lines out the door every single day. I remember seeing my 2-week paycheck after the first 2 weeks around Christmas, and I'd worked 119 hours. It was absolute insanity. For another reference, the closest town had a permanent residency of less than 10,000 people. But during Christmas, it jumped up to 70,000 people trying to enjoy their vacation in the same spot. So one of these days, it was business as usual, a quarter-mile line out the door, non-stop craziness. I was at the bench closest to the door helping a lady when this kid walks up to my bench. I asked if I could help him and he said he had a reserved rental online and just wanted to pick it up. I said our store name and then said, "If that's where you reserved, you'll need to get back in the line and we'll help you as soon as we can." This 13-year-old kid said, "This is frickin' bullcrap," in front of the customer I was helping. I told him that quite literally every piece of equipment in our store was reserved, every single person in front of you has a reservation as well, and we have to help everyone. He started insulting me personally, saying I was a stupid witch and that he was going to report us to anyone he could because we weren't letting him skip hundreds of people doing the exact same thing he was doing. I think what made him really angry is that I'm a 6'3" woman and big. He was maybe 5 foot and something like 120 pounds, so when he called me a stupid B-word, it wasn't witch by the way, I literally laughed in his face. I was at no point threatened by this child, and at first it was funny. This lady left, I was ignore-laughing this kid and asking for the next person who was patiently waiting in line, and he starts yelling every cuss word in the book at me because I'm not helping him. Up until this point, my manager had been a complete jerk and I was not a fan of him. But he had had enough of the Christmas rush as well, and it was the perfect person to let off some steam on. I went and got my manager and told him this kid was personally attacking me and yelling cuss words in front of customers. So he walks up to the kid saying, "I'm sorry for the confusion, what's your name so I can take a look at your reservation?" And the kid lights up, thinking he finally beat the system and he'll get what he wants because he threw a public tantrum in front of everyone. My manager went and found his reservation. It was digital, but I'm pretty sure he printed it off for added dramatic effect. Came back and says, "Found it," and proceeds to rip it in half in front of the kid's face. Don't ever treat someone that's trying to help you like that again, you're never allowed in our store again, and with every other store in town also being completely 100% booked on equipment, good luck skiing this weekend. I still didn't like the guy, but I respected him 1 point more for the rest of the season for standing up for me. I worked in a T-Mobile store. A lady came in screaming about how she bought a phone the previous day but didn't buy insurance and then dropped it in a pool immediately. She was demanding I give her a new phone for free, but she wasn't even our customer. She was a Verizon customer. She screamed at me for about 10 minutes demanding I call our manager. She then started yelling at other customers about how awful we were. We called the cops. This tale takes place roughly 22 years ago at a community college bookstore. As with any college bookstore, the start of the semesters were incredibly busy. In order to help ease the insanity in our little place, we set up a table outside the front door for doing returns. And that's where I was stationed for the day. People got in line, they got to me, I processed the paperwork for their return and sent them inside to the cashiers. This is an important point. I had no cash, no ability to process cards, just me, a table, a stack of paper, and some pens. That's it. Well, a middle-aged lady gets to me. She's obviously not lacking for funds. Her son has dropped all of his classes and she's just returning his books. Okay, cool. I do all the paperwork, hand her back the document, and direct her inside. And she goes ballistic that she has to wait in line again. I mean, starting nuclear wars ballistic. The customers in line behind her actually went to my manager to file formal statements about her behavior. Not my behavior, hers. Because they knew. I took a break and shook it off. Everyone has bad days, and I know that I have the customers' statements to back me up. A few days pass and the manager gets a call. It's the president of the college, with a complaint. The woman called the president of the college to complain about me personally. So my manager and I head off to a meeting with the president and the woman. We walked in calm and polite. The woman instantly begins her tirade, still screaming and cursing. My manager pulls out the statements and without a word hands them to the president. The president calmly reads them. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I do remember watching the woman turn more and more red. I do remember the word entitled used a bunch of times. And I do remember him saying, "Don't waste my time ever again," before he showed her the door. I had a customer who used a racial slur to describe one of my employees for no other reason beyond the fact that he saw them and was offended that one of them was doing their job by doing the oil change that he came to us to do. I told him to apologize to my employee or we'll push his car right out of the bay without oil. He refused, so we did just that. Told him he's more than welcome to buy his own oil and finish his oil change himself, and that he'll be charged double for all services here on out if he comes into my store. I had no problem telling this racist idiot to go screw himself. When I worked in the tool department at Sears, a guy wanted to get a replacement on his tape measure. I couldn't replace it because it was the tape that was messed up due to the guy mistreating it, and not caring because in his mind, Sears will replace it for free. The guy threatened to go out to his truck and get his shotty, come back in and shoot you, points at me, you, points at my manager who's taken over already, and you, points at my coworker who's standing nearby. I gave him the, "Why haven't you done it yet?" look, and he left. I worked at Sears. I was ready to die. Say what you will about all the crappy jobs I had as a student, none of them jaded me enough to the point where I could stare down a potential attacker and dare him to end my misery. Also, leaping to that threat over what, a $5, $10 tool? Wild. I worked at a pawn shop for a couple of years. We had a customer pawn a chainsaw which turned up stolen and was confiscated by police, which causes the store to lose money and police to be aware that he's a known thief. He came back something close to 3 months later to pawn something else. I didn't recognize him right away. I asked him if he'd pawned anything before, and he said yes. So I asked his last name and entered it into our computer, which promptly said, stolen. My first thought was, really? You came back here? I gave my boss, it's literally a 2-person store, a not very frequently used signal to discreetly call the police. Meanwhile, I started acting like I was working on his loan and stalled a bit. Just a couple of minutes later, a few police cars pulled up and the officers quietly walked in and he immediately gave up. I didn't really have to say anything to him. The handcuffs spoke for themselves. When the old guy I was serving kept looking at my chest and making creepy facial expressions, I asked him if he wanted a drink or if he was just going to keep staring. He excitedly put his hands out and went, "Oh, I can do more than stare," and tried to walk behind the bar. I told him to get the F out, to which he seemed very shocked and outraged, so I just started to loudly shout back to him, "Sir, please do not try to grope my chest, you need to leave," over and over again until the rest of the bar was staring, and he was panickedly whispering for me to please be quiet, so the wife I didn't know he came with wouldn't hear him. Can only imagine the argument that unfolded while she was dragging him out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was 18 and worked at a local grocery store in the produce department. Beyond regular duties, we made fruit trays on weekends. Nothing fancy, just a variety of cut-up fruit in large red bowls. A guy came in after 10 p.m., we closed at 11, and asked for a tray with specific fruits. I tell him we unfortunately don't make custom trays, and then the 16-year-old guy who was also on shift with me overheard and told him it was slower tonight so he can do it for him. He says, "Okay, good." No gratefulness displayed at all. This coworker of mine is legit always extra kind to customers, and it's actually quite admirable. 20 minutes later, my coworker comes out of the back and presents it to this customer. He immediately starts screaming at him about how bad it looks. He yells things like, "That looks like absolute crap! Frick, are you an idiot?" And I run over to see what the problem is. The fruit tray looks absolutely standard, but this guy isn't having it. He smashes it on the ground and keeps screaming about how we are, quote, retarded, and that we've wasted his time. I snap and tell him to get the F out. He postures up. Keep in mind this is a guy in his 40s ready to fight some teenagers over a fruit tray. Numerous other employees run over and yell at him to get out. He says, "I'll be back for all of you retards," and runs towards and out of the sliding doors. All of this was on camera, luckily, so management calls the cops regarding his actions and that last threat. They end up arresting him later on because apparently he also had some warrants. I hope the fruit was worth it, idiot. Working as assistant general manager at a fast casual restaurant, and some 40-something woman starts going off on my cashier. I round the corner from the desk to see her dump soup all over our front-end cooler and knock a bunch of stuff onto the ground. I tell my cook to call 911 and say there's a woman causing a disturbance and breaking stuff. The address is next to the phone. I walk up and stand behind the counter and put on my happiest manager face, so overly happy that it drove the woman even more into a fit. So, raging cyclone-mad Karen starts knocking crap off the counters, throws 2 IBC root beers on the ground, and starts yelling at another guest who tried to come over and defuse the situation. I hold out for another few minutes before 2 cops run in. She's been screaming for a refund for 10 minutes at this point and breaking stuff. The cops walk in, I point at her and say, "Get her the F out of my restaurant," and she's arrested. Apparently her soup was too hot. Thanks for the frickin' headache, Karen. I comped 7 meals of other guests and had to work a double because my cashier was in a state and had to deal with the cops. Frick food service. I'm so glad that I'm out. Guy seated in the freezer of Trader Joe's, pants down, staring at a fresh turd he'd just laid in the middle of the aisle. It couldn't have been more obvious that the guy was trying to return stolen merchandise. He lost the receipt, didn't know when it was purchased, paid with cash so he couldn't just easily look up the transaction on a credit card. He said he'd call his friend to ask if they knew when it was purchased, and then he took out his iPhone without pressing a button and started to talk on it. I was like, I can clearly see the home screen with no call happening. When he got off the phone, I got a little bold and in my best retail manager voice said something to the effect of, "Oh, that's cool. Is that a new update where you can talk to someone without actually calling them?" And he left after that. Well, pretty slick line. It's always the stupidest people who seem to think that all other people are dumber than them, isn't it? There must be an expression for that way of thinking. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, but the thing you think you're good at is life. Oh, my best story comes from my manager, on my behalf. I'd recently had a very bad experience in my first paid job and quit because I felt so insecure about my appearance and ability to work in a typical work environment. I have achondroplastic dwarfism, making me 4 feet tall and disproportionate. So instead, I was volunteering in a small-town charity shop to gain some confidence again. My manager knew all about this, and I was in the back room when this guy comes in and rings the bell. I walk in and he just stares at me, laughs, and says, "Is this Santa's workshop?" And I just stand there. My manager, who's at the till, says coldly, "Excuse me?" And the guy looks taken aback. "Sorry, I didn't expect to see someone like that here." They both look at me and I just awkwardly said something like, "Well, I am," and shrugged. And it would have been fine until he said, "So, do you make the toys?" My manager walked out from behind the counter, pointed out the door and said flatly, "Do not disrespect my staff. Get out." The guy started apologizing. "Out!" He still seemed to find the situation hilarious and left. Man, I miss that manager. She was the best. Thank you, Bianca. I used to work the reception desk at a tattoo shop. I had many get the frick out moments, but the one that stands out was a guy coming in with his girlfriend to get his name tattooed on her. She looked terrified, wouldn't make eye contact with me, didn't talk directly to me, and barely spoke. The whole conversation was the guy giving me her license and saying, she wants my name tattooed on her. I took way more info from both of them than I needed and tried to get the woman to come out back alone so I could talk to her, but the boyfriend wouldn't have it. I eventually went back and got the shop manager, a big dude, and told him what was up. I came back to the counter and lied, saying we didn't have walk-ins that day, and the guy got angry. Started yelling, shop manager came out and physically removed them from the shop. I called the cops and provided all the info I had. Was basically told they couldn't do anything unless it was self-reported. I still think about that woman all the time. I work at a Dutch 24/7 gas station. This German kid, between 20 to 25 years old, came into the shop drunk while driving, looked for beer, which we're not allowed to sell, and then got angry because he thought I'd hidden them from him. He wanted to start a fight and wanted to drive off in his car. That was impossible since I locked the door and alerted the cops. He lost his driver's license and got a huge fine which he had to pay instantly. What a jerk. The one that jumps out to me was when a customer was trying to return a wall mount that was 6 months out of policy. He was being snide and just laying into the customer service rep saying things like, "I know you can do this, I return crap out of policy all the time," or, "Well, if you weren't so stupid, it would be done by now." He ended up making her start to cry when he said, "Jesus Christ, are you retarded?" Well, she worked with special needs kids as a volunteer, and this pushed her over the edge. I walked over to him and told her to go into the back and asked him why he thinks it's okay to talk like that. I'm guessing since I'm a male and a manager, he decided to be respectful. I was angry beyond belief at how he had made her cry though, so I cut off his explanation and told him to get out. He said, "Now, hold on, let's all calm down," and I grabbed my radio piece and told security to go ahead and get the police on the way down there for someone trespassing. He left so fast at that comment that he forgot his wall mount. Jerk. This was over the phone. The customer was unhappy with their purchase, so I sent another one out to them in case it was defective. He called me later that week saying the new one had the same problem and he'd get violent if it wasn't solved. He was in his 80s, but I said, "You know what, we'll come pick it up and you can buy from somewhere else." It wasn't worth the hassle for a tiny commission. I used to work for Quick Lube in Alaska for a boss named John who was a decent manager and enjoyed handling customers. He was professional and kind and knowledgeable, but loved to tell a couple of stories of customers he had told off. The coldest move was a customer who was berating him. The customer reached out and stuffed a business card into John's shirt pocket, demanding to see the boss right now. John said he took the card back out, shoved it in that guy's pocket and said, "The buck stops here, get the frick out of my shop." I've carried that as a reminder that professionals take crap as part of their job, but nobody should take too much. A guy I knew who worked at Dunkin' Donuts would use the line, "My manager says I only get to tell one customer to F off a year and I'm not going to waste that on you." Not quite the right type of answer, but relevant. I mean, this suggests that this guy actually had a really low tolerance for customer bullcrap since he had this zinger ready to go, and he's almost certainly still getting in trouble for it if the customer wants to report things, but I can't blame him. I worked at a barbecue restaurant for my first job. We had a takeout area where the customers can watch you cut the meat and pack the side dishes. The girl at the register rang up a quart of potato salad when the customer asked for a pasta salad, so I packed potato salad. When the customer received his order, he looked through it and flipped out when he saw potato salad and started screaming at me. Go figure. Unbeknownst to all of us, the owner of the store heard the commotion and was on the other side of the swing door behind me, which had a small window. The angry customer decided to throw a quart of potato salad at me, which I ducked to avoid. It splattered against the window on the swing door as the owner was looking out of it. The owner burst through the door. He's 6'4" and very built, grabbed this scrawny guy by his shirt collar, and that guy straight up had fear in his eyes. My boss literally threw him out the door, went back to the register to ask the girl what his total was, grabbed the cash, and tossed it out the door at the angry customer as he was collecting himself off the ground. It was an awesome scene. In short, my former boss threw a customer out the door after the customer threw potato salad at me. I was a supervisor in a store where people could trade in goods for other secondhand stuff. One guy stands out, and I had a lot of imbeciles to deal with over my 7 years there. This guy had previously bought a phone from us and came back demanding we give him his money back or a new phone as the one we sold him had a crack in it. As it's secondhand, we might have missed the hairline crack during our testing. I thought, no biggie, so we swapped it. Thought that was the end of that. About a month later, he's the first customer of the day and he's cussing us out because his phone isn't working. He has a warranty, so we take the phone, open the casing, and what do we see? The phone is water damaged. 100% not how he would have sold it, since that's the first thing checked during a test. We tell him his warranty is void. Him and his wife freak out and start shouting, saying they'll stay here all day and tell others not to shop with us. I'm like, you're wasting your time, at least I'm paid to be here. Obviously, they don't like that, but he also slips up by saying, if I'd known it was water damaged, don't you think I would have pulled the sticker off so you guys wouldn't notice? The guy straight up confirms he's a fraud, keeps demanding his money back. At this point, I call center security and tell them what's up. They come in and say he has to leave. He says it's a public place. I decide to chime in and state it's private property, he's banned, and he can get the frick out. The guy won't leave when security demand it, so they get on the radio to the cops as the guy is now technically trespassing. His dumb harpy of a wife screeches at him, and they both hightail it out. All before I'd had my morning tea. What is the most chaotic good act that you've ever witnessed? My former employer had a metered parking lot. The lot was heavily monitored and they'd ticket you like the minute your crap expired. It was decidedly not good for business. People want to be able to linger in a coffee shop, you know? Besides, there was no reason for that lot to be metered anyhow. It was barely even adjacent to anything but our shop. Well, the meter just started breaking. All the time. It would get fixed by the city, but then a few days later, it'd be smashed or jammed or whatever. We asked if people would be towed, and the city was like, no meter, no tickets. One night I stayed a bit late to clean a freezer. When I left, I spotted my boss breaking the freshly fixed meter. She was like, yep, guess I'm a criminal, huh? I once counseled one of my students in my homeroom to quit school, get a GED, and enroll in an apprenticeship program. Had I been caught, I would have been fired, since policy was to try and motivate all students to graduate. The kid was failing all of his classes, which were 9th grade courses, but he was smart, working a full-time job, and was already 18 years old and had a crappy home life. Honestly, that's the smartest path for a determined and hardworking kid who doesn't thrive in academia. Good for you. He probably makes good money and has a stable job now. I hope so. He didn't take the advice right away. As long as he was enrolled as a full-time student, his family kept getting a payout from funds due to his father's earlier death. He only came to school because his mum needed that payout to help raise his younger siblings. He planned to keep it up until he aged out of the funding thing in a few years, and then he could finally quit coming to school, get a GED, change jobs to something 9 to 5 finally. So he and I made a sort of pact of, if I don't harass you about your schoolwork, will you at least pretend that I do try to get you to do your schoolwork so that the principal doesn't figure out that I let you sleep in my class? I'll let you sleep all you need because I know you work late and you care about your little siblings. Meanwhile, here are practice materials for the GED. Do them when you can so you don't forget anything. As soon as you can do it, go and take that test. This confused a few classmates since they knew I wouldn't allow them to sleep in class even though I allowed him to do so without penalty. This was back in the late 1950s when my granddad was just a teenager, 14 to 15 years old, and he lived in a rural area in Arizona. This relatively new family in town was arousing suspicion because the wife and kids were always banged up. My grandpa's stepfather spoke to the man of the house and told him that people could see what he was doing to his family and he needed to stop. When he didn't stop, my grandpa's stepdad excused himself for dinner one night and left the house for the evening. The following day on the way to school, my granddad was on the bus and drove across a field where Family Man McGee was tied to one of the posts, beat to holy heck. My granddad, the bus driver, and the older student helped untie the guy and got him onto the bus so that he could get back home. No one talked about it, but apparently my grandpa's stepdad and a couple of other local guys caught up to the guy and beat the crap out of him so that he'd know how his defenseless family had it. Saying he excused himself paints such a good picture of him politely dabbing the corners of his mouth with his napkin and slowly pushing back from the table, just to go and grab this dude and whip his butt. Haha, dope. This is indeed a satisfying story, one that we should probably try and replace with getting the cops and CPS involved in the modern day and age, though. When I used to walk home from class at night, there's this guy that would always call me gangster, major respect, but never anything else. For the reference, I'm a 19-year-old short Hawaiian girl and not very threatening looking. We'll call this guy JD. He'd ask how my day was, if I'm getting home okay, if I had any problems getting home. I began to look forward to it when I was walking home from class. A couple of times I'd be having a bad day, and this guy, who was outside, rain or shine, would always say hi to me. One day I was walking back, and he was talking to a buddy. Said buddy looked over at me and whistled, to which JD whacked him on the shoulder and said angrily, "Show some respect," and smiled at me and said, "Hope you have a good night, gangster. I hope he's doing all right." That video of the guy picking up litter thrown out of his car before physically throwing the passenger out. Threw into a park, turned on his hazard lights, waved the vehicle behind to alert them, and finally picked up and throwing out the trash. I don't care if it's staged or real, it was a delight to watch. A friend of mine had a roommate that stole a painting that was given to my friend. The roommate claimed that it was his and refused to return it, so I broke into their house at 2 in the morning and stole the painting back. I didn't tell anyone and kept it at my house until the roommate moved out. My friend and his painting are now reunited. The kid who stole it was a real piece of work. He would do this kind of stuff to everyone. Multiple people that I know have had this complaint about him, and he also brags about stealing stuff from people. The painting was given to my friend as a present while he lived with the roommate for the first time. They both moved out at different times but chose to live together in a new house. During the moving process, the roommate took the painting and hid it from my friend for weeks. Then at the new place, he revealed the painting to my friend and explained that he wouldn't be giving it back. I caught wind of this story and decided to take matters into my own hands. The city of Sao Paulo never cleaned its tunnels, so they got black from all the car's fumes over the years. This guy cleaned skull drawings in the soot using a rag and some water. The city sent officials to try and stop him, but hey, he was cleaning, no vandalism there. Eventually they sent someone with a hose to clean this guy's vandalism for good, only to discover how dirty the walls truly were. That reminds me of the one where people spray-painted wangs on potholes in the road to force the city to fix them faster. Something similar is happening in Cologne in Germany. They have these incredibly dirty walls, so some people took it upon themselves to do art with pressured sand. The city is against it, so they clean the parts of the walls where there is art. It's called reverse graffiti. If the city catches you, they fine you, since it's treated like real graffiti. There was a guy in my historical town of 800 people named Casey. Casey was the town police. We didn't have an actual police force, just the sheriffs from the county an hour away. So Casey was the law. He rode around on his bike, beating up people who did things like break into cars or harass people. Now, Casey himself wasn't exactly an upstanding citizen. He moved around a lot and dabbled in crystal, he grew huge green herb plants in the anise fields behind town, and was generally the kind of guy who looked shady. Except everyone in town knew Casey and everyone trusted him completely. If someone had a problem with the admittedly large population of crystal heads in town, they'd go find Casey and he'd bash heads in and shame people until they either left or towed the line. Imagine an incredibly white trash paladin with a series of crippling vices and a children's bicycle, and you have Casey. Casey also made wax out of green herb in his spare time. This is unsurprising because Casey can make literally anything. Anyway, I'm out of town one day and Casey comes knocking on my door looking to share his new bounty. When I don't answer the door, he decides to leave me some. A normal person would have put the wax on some waxed paper or in a container and then left it on my porch. Not Casey. Casey smeared a very generous amount of green herb wax all over my metal doorknob. Being Casey, he forgets to leave a note to tell me he did this. I came home late that night and put my hand on the doorknob and ended up screaming at my lungs because it was unexpectedly sticky. It was good wax though. About the Great British Bake Off hosts. When contestants do cry, out of frustration or disappointment generally, Mel and Sue stand near them and use unairable language, so the embarrassing footage is tainted and won't make it into the final edit. And strangely enough, I've heard that the unairable language is predominantly brand names rather than cursing. Imagining Mel and Sue having an entire conversation completely in brand names, simultaneously ruining footage and making the upset contestant laugh. Two older British women standing next to a man crying over a soufflé just chanting the C word over and over. I love this image and I will think of it whenever I'm feeling low. Thank you, imaginary versions of Mel and Sue. When I was in high school, I was an extremely troubled teen. Legal trouble, substance usage, violence, mental illness, failing every class, the whole gamut. When I was in 11th grade, I was put into a special education program for people like me. And I did wonderfully. I adored my teachers and vice versa. One teacher in particular was amazing. She helped me set goals, get on track. She even helped me find my first real job. My senior year, I was doing really well in my classes, but this school was set up like a college in that you needed a set amount of credits to graduate, and I was woefully short. I still needed something like 22 or 24 credits, completely impossible to make up in my last year. Even though I was doing well, there was no chance I was going to graduate. So my lovely teacher started digging through my record. She somehow converted my community service, treatment stays, lockup time, and all the consequences for my behavior into credits. She turned institutionalization into fricking elective credits. By the end of my senior year, I had 1/2 credit to make up in summer school. I was able to walk with my class for graduation in June and received my high school diploma in August. To this day, I have no idea how she did it, but she absolutely changed my life. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. A Brazilian substance trafficker has been praised on social media as the modern-day Robin Hood after he kidnapped 2 nurses, stole vaccines and syringes, and ordered the medical staff to inoculate residents in one of the poorest areas in the country's southeast. Thomas Vieira Gomes has made headlines in the local press for acts of charity over the past year, even as authorities have issued successive warrants for his arrest. His most recent gesture of generosity to combat yellow fever, which has swept poverty-stricken areas of Brazil, has seen him lauded primarily as a hero rather than a villain. The substance gang leader, known on the street as 2N, held hostage 2 nurses from a vaccination center before transporting them and their equipment to one of the poorest favelas in Rio de Janeiro. The Latin American television station Telesur reported that Gomez's gang oversaw the nurses as they administered vaccinations over a 2-hour period in the Salgueiro favela. Once they'd finished administering the injections, they were returned to their workplace. In a report on the incident, the health workers said their kidnappers had treated them well and without any aggression. They said they'd complied with the hostage takers because many Salgueiro residents hadn't been given access to immunization centers. Despite the illegality of Gomez and his gang's actions, officials have praised the hostage-taking. Carlos Mink, a state deputy and a former minister of the environment, wrote on Twitter that the immunizations had been done as an act of public service. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I once caused traffic to come to a standstill on a 5-lane highway because a dog was running around and narrowly avoiding being hit several times. I pulled my car to the shoulder and jumped out to try and get the dog off the highway. Seeing this, several people got out of their cars to help. After about 10 minutes of us trying to chase this dog off the highway, the owner comes and the dog jumps right into her car. Everyone else gets in their car and leaves while I'm talking to the very relieved owner who couldn't believe all of these people got out to try and save her dog. Once she gets in her car and leaves, I realize I'm on the opposite side of a 5-lane highway from my car and no one is stopping to let me pass. Finally, a trucker must have noticed my predicament and starts cutting off traffic and slows down so that I could walk to get to my car. Another trucker follows suit and I'm able to get back to my car and back on the road. It wasn't until later that I realized how dangerous what I had done had been, but it was worth it to see the owner reunited with her dog. In conclusion, rallied an army of motorists to try and save a runaway dog. I was at a psychedelic rock concert in New York City that involved quite a bit of light moshing and crowd surfing. A really fun show overall. If you've never crowd surfed before, there's 2 main ways that it's usually done. Either you get up on the stage and jump off hoping that the crowd will catch you, or you ask a couple of strong-looking people around you to just lift you up. But at this concert, there was a third way. There was a big intimidating-looking guy in the middle of the mosh pit who apparently spent the entire concert down on all fours, getting people to jump off his back and start crowd surfing. He especially tried to wave in people who seemed nervous to try it. Overall, he must have gotten at least 50 people to crowd surf who had never tried it before. It was really a magical sight to behold. A guy at the local Dunkin' Donuts has to throw out donuts after someone tried to sue them for donating poisoned donuts or whatever. He gladly throws them out and then walks back inside. Whatever happens to them isn't any of his business, since it's trash anyway. He says he stopped trying to catch the mysterious garbage thief after 30 seconds of trying because he isn't paid enough to care. At the Dunkin' Donuts my brother worked at, a homeless guy would politely stand next to the dumpster. The employee would place the bag of expired donuts in the dumpster and close the lid, then homeless guy would open the dumpster and take them out. It was on video and the manager required that the rules be followed. It was very lawful neutral. I think this would really be lawful good. The employees obey the rules, and the homeless men would wait until protocol had been followed and everyone benefited. In case anyone is wondering, yes, the narrator chose the topic that made him think about Dungeons & Dragons the most. What can I say? I'm obsessed. My grandma was a kindergarten teacher for 50 years. Yes, you heard that correctly. She retired at the mandatory age of 72. It was a small community, mostly economically okay, but some poverty. Every few years, Grandma would develop a case of the clumsy. She'd trip while watering plants, and wouldn't you know it, but she'd spill a bit of water on the child that was unwashed and wore the same clothes for weeks. Nothing for it but to make up for the mistake by giving him a bath and clean clothes. Then return the clothes she messed up after she had cleaned them. A case of clumsy would last the whole school year, and oddly enough, she'd tripped near the same child every time. The case of clumsy often meant that she miscounted her grandchildren every morning and made an extra lunch. "You there, would you mind taking this lunch so it doesn't go to waste?" There was this Thai infomercial about a lady who owns a marketplace, and she went to visit the people who rented her place and just started getting angry and wreaking havoc, breaking weighing scales, etc. She was filmed by the buyers and the video went viral and all these negative comments. Turns out the sellers she was angry with were playing tricks with the customers, like using rigged weighing scales, starting with 1 kilo. Wanksy would spray paint wangs around potholes so the government would fix them. Some people plant trees in potholes for the same reason. Be the change you want to see in the world. This one actually happened yesterday at work. A girl and her mum came in and got a few sandwiches, but the girl wanted a brownie. They were paying cash, but were like $3 short for the brownie. The girl didn't throw a fit or anything, but was pretty sad. I was just gonna let them take it, it's just a brownie, but before I can say anything, the guy behind them says, "I would like all but 5 of your brownies." Mind you, this is like 40 fricking brownies, which costs like $110 of just brownies. He proceeded to give the girl all of the brownies, and she needed 3 bags just to carry all of them. The girl was ecstatic, and everyone else was laughing their butts off. We'll never forget you, brownie man. I've never seen it personally, but I rather like Richard Ancrom's guerrilla public service. There was a sign on the freeway in Los Angeles area that was providing confusing directions, so he fabricated an overlay to Caltrans standards and installed it himself without any sort of government permission. Caltrans eventually found out, inspected it, and allowed it to stay. I like that eventually turned out to be almost a decade. My parents stole my neighbor's dog and rehomed it because they were mistreating it. My parents did this with a cat. The neighbor was throwing rocks at the cat because he didn't want the cat in the house. My dad confronted him and said, "F you, this is our cat now," and took the cat home. Our old tenants had a 14-year-old, declawed, flea-infested, super sweet kitty. She was so tiny, and when we kicked them out, he was going to just release the cat into the wild. So my dad said, "Go F yourself," and we took her in. She infested all of our other pets with fleas, but it was worth it. She got to live until 17 with us. So, you know how you'll have childhood friends, and eventually they go their separate ways, but you still stay in touch. My brother had a friend who got into crystal and had this little 8-pound, 8-month-old puppy. He would get high, blow smoke in the puppy's face, treat him badly, etc. One day he told a third friend from the group, "Man, I can't take care of this thing anymore. I'm just gonna dump him on the side of the road." So the second friend basically goes, "No, F that," and steals the dog the night before. A week goes by and he's being fostered at the good guy dog thief's house. He then asks my brother, "Hey man, your brother want a dog? I have a 9-pound wiener dog, who at the time could use a friend since I worked 9 hours a day and my wiener could be all alone." So of course I said, "Yeah, let's go visit this guy." I show up and unlock the back gate and am immediately met at eye level with 3 Great Danes. And running around in the bushes is this comically small, long-haired mutt. We go inside and I sit on the couch and the pup runs right up to me, gets in my lap, rolls over for a belly rub. It's like the guy never grew up in a crystal house. Needless to say, my wiener has a friend now. There's a group that does guerrilla ramp building to help with those mobility issues around the city. They've stepped up in so many of the areas that the city and businesses have been ineffective in maintaining code in, or outright illegally ignored it to the detriment of citizens. I freaking love them and I donate to them whenever I can. The next is the guys who spray paint wangs all over potholes so the city has to come out and fix them. If I see them doing this in real life one day, I'm stopping traffic to A, help, B, kiss them, because thank you. When I was still in my medical training in LA, I often saw a middle-aged gentleman putting coins into expired meters. The one time I saw a meter maid try to approach him and he ran off giggling. A few months later I saw him at a stop sign in a Maserati. Basically the definition of chaotic good. This is a bizarre pseudo-crime with an illustrious history actually, as one commenter lays out. Paying meters for random strangers ahead of the meter enforcement personnel was part of a strange court case in my state recently. Basically, these college kids would walk around town just ahead of parking enforcement personnel, who were trying to issue tickets and feed the expired meters so no tickets could be written. This cost the city tens of thousands of dollars in tickets, so the city went after the kids for harassment. Lo and behold, after the city spent nearly $80,000 in legal expenses, the kids won because they were paying the meters and there's no law against that. I worked in daycare, and over the summer the kids had to bring their own lunch. One extremely undernourished and developmentally behind toddler only got things like chocolate frosting between slices of white bread for lunch. I started packing extra of my own lunch, with healthy stuff like yogurt and fresh vegetables, and sat her on my lap each lunchtime and coaxed her to eat it. It was totally against the rules and probably illegal, but the lead teacher and I couldn't just sit there and watch her literally eat frosting for lunch, so I got permission to take over myself. We just kept it quiet. I teach English as a foreign language to high schoolers. I have one class where the class clown is always trying to be disruptive, but his method is to shout encouragement whenever someone answers a question, like, "You a genius," or "You so intelligent." I have to act annoyed, because I know he'll stop doing it if he ever knew how much I fricking love it. Friend's mother found out her husband, my friend's father, was part of a group that made inappropriate content featuring children when the police showed up to arrest him. He had realized that they were about to get him, so was trying to escape the country via the local airport. He had told her his mother was sick and he was going to visit. She not only told the police where he was, but raced them to him, slide-tackled him at the airport before he disappeared, and was in the process of beating him to a pulp when the police arrived and pulled her off him. When my ex was arrested in front of our house for a similar offense, I said something along the lines of, "I want to kick his ass." The cop turned to me and with a very serious look on his face said, "Go ahead, we don't mind." That video where a guy paid for everyone's food if they were behind him just because two girls cut in front of him. I think it was at In-N-Out. The video's been reposted many times on any social media. Once in grade school, one of the kids was torturing another kid who was on the spectrum. He was running behind him and hitting him with a stick. They both ran right by me and I instinctively stuck my leg out and tripped the bully. He got bloody hands and knees for hitting the concrete. I got detention and a note sent home to my parents. I didn't care. I would have done it again. My parents took me out for ice cream, they were so proud of me. What are some wholesome historical facts not taught in school? In 2006, while the Ivory Coast was in the midst of a civil war, the opposing sides agreed to a ceasefire so they could all watch the World Cup. The break in fighting paved the way for a peace agreement a year later. During the Revolutionary War, a British general left his dog behind during a chaotic retreat. When the Continental Army found the lost dog, George Washington had a messenger go under a flag of truce to return the dog to its owner. Truly a man's best friend. Abraham Lincoln decided to grow a beard because of 11-year-old Grace Bedell. She had written him that she thought he would look more handsome and less sad with a beard, and women would tell their husbands to vote for him. So he grew a beard and was elected. On his way to his inauguration, he took a train and passed through her hometown in Westfield, New York, and met her. There was another great story of him where a rival politician called him two-faced. He came back with, "If I had a second face, do you think I'd pick this one?" The Formula One Grand Prix in 1976. After Niki Lauda crashed while hitting a barrier and catching a light, rival drivers Arturo Mazzario, Guy Edwards, Harold Ertel and Brett Lunger all stopped their cars and ran to Lauda's aid. There are many such instances of this happening during the 50s right through to the 80s, of championship drivers forfeiting a win to save a rival's life. And then he won his second championship the very next year. He also retired from driving, then came back and won another championship 2 years later by half a point. After a crash like he had, most drivers wouldn't be the same after. But not Niki, though. It just made him stronger. Rest in peace, Niki. During World War II, a German fighter pilot spotted a damaged American bomber, and rather than shooting it down, he decided to escort it to safety. Decades later, the two pilots found each other and became friends. There was a documentary some time ago where a man who'd been a Japanese prisoner of war met the Japanese man who'd essentially tortured him for years. After the war, the former Japanese officer had become a devout Buddhist, and upon meeting his former prisoner, he begged for his forgiveness for all the wrongs committed against him. They ended up good friends. That is a story of humbling examples of redemption and grace. I would love to hear how both of them were able to find the strength to take their respective parts in that story. When the pharaoh Mentuhotep II's harem daughter died around 2050 BC, he mourned. She was only 5 years old. Her tomb, touchingly, was inscribed with the pet name Meat. This is translated to kitten. The Candy Bomber. After World War II ended and Berlin was divided, the UK and US dropped food into West Berlin by plane. One pilot, Gail Halvorson, started to donate his candy rations to the children, and soon other pilots started doing the same. To let the children know that it was his plane, the one with the candy, they would wiggle the plane's wings before the drop. Word spread and more children would come, and it started a new PR campaign and started to change the mindset that Americans had of giving food to Europe. I always thought the story was really sweet. This is a pretty common PR move by the American military in modern times. Candy, music, movies, magazines. It's cheap as crap, life-changing to a child who's never had it. Positive feelings towards Americans from childhood. Yeah, but this guy did it of his own initiative, though. He saw a group of kids with nothing by the airport and gave them a few pieces of gum that they split up, and then when they ran out of gum, the kids that didn't get any sniffed the wrapper. He promised to bring more, and when the kids asked him how they'd know it was him, he told them that he'd wiggle his wings. He went back to the base and got a couple of his buddies to pool their candy rations, and he created 3 little parachutes to drop them. Later, the commander found out and gave his support. He didn't end his candy-dropping career in Berlin either, though. In 1994, he persuaded the Air Force to let him drop hundreds of candy bars over Bosnia-Herzegovina as part of Operation Provide Promise. Another larger drop was planned and executed by Halvorson over Kosovo in 1999. Additional candy drops have been enacted in Japan, Guam, Albania, and across the United States. In 2003 and 2004, he advocated a similar series of candy drops over Baghdad as a humanitarian mission to be a ray of hope, a symbol that somebody in America cares. My friends from the Balkans have told me that the bitter combats of the wars after the breakup of Yugoslavia used to stop because both sides liked watching Mexican soap operas. Ah, Mexican soap operas, the true olive branch. Telenovelas are the best. I watched many drama-filled hours at the laundromat. You don't need to understand a word of Spanish to follow the plot. The India-Pakistan border is one of the most disputed ones in the world, giving rise to the world-renowned hostilities between India and Pakistan. There was a time once, a prominent Indian singer, namely Lata Mangeshkar, had gone to perform a concert for the soldiers there. As soon as the show began, Pakistani troops started firing rounds in the air, yelling obscenities and said, "We want to hear her voice too!" So the Indian forces turned up the speakers and pointed them towards the border. Pakistani forces returned the favor when prominent Pakistani singers came to perform for them. I've heard that Indian and Pakistani soldiers get together to watch the India vs. Pakistan cricket matches. The only reason the pilgrims stopped at Plymouth Rock was that they were running out of beer. They had to grow barley and hops. Based on Eric the Red's account, the first ritual done in the New World was when a German Balkan oarsman was found praising the berries identical to the ones used for brewing in his homeland. Ringo Starr once decided the Beatles didn't need him and decided to take a holiday with the intention of never coming back. When John, Paul, and George found out, they went all the way to where he was staying just to convince him to come back. As I recall, he got sick of all the bickering during the recording of the White Album, so it's actually Paul playing the drums in the first few songs. When Ringo came back, his drum kit was all decked out with flowers. Pennsylvania was founded by Quakers, who believed that the light of God shined in everyone regardless of ethnicity or religion. They were known for treating the indigenous people relatively well and welcomed the first synagogue in North America in Philadelphia. That is true. They also created the basis for solitary confinement in prisons, so there are some drawbacks. They didn't think of solitary confinement as extra punishment, but as a period to reflect without distraction and determine to build a better life. The idea was that if time for solitary reflection is good, then 24/7 must be even better. So it was born of good intentions and ivory tower thinking rather than extra sadism. There was a dog in World War I that helped snuff out mustard gas, named Sergeant Stubby. They released a movie about him in 2018, I think. The dog was a stray that joined a man on his deployment to France in World War I and saved the lives of countless American, British, and French soldiers. The Polish army had a gosh darn bear fighting on their side in World War II, Sergeant Wojtek the Bear. He's still on the regiment's coat of arms carrying an artillery shell. A very cute, alcoholic, chain-smoking bear. Wojtek was a bear that served in the Polish 2nd Artillery Unit. During his service, Wojtek was a huge morale boost to the men. fighting multiple men in wrestling matches, eating lit cigarettes, and even foiling a Saudi Arabian plot to attack the camp by discovering a spy in the shower. Wojtek's unit was caught in an artillery battle. He looked around and began carrying artillery shells to the launchers like the men around him. For his service, Wojtek was promoted to corporal and was given an honorable discharge. Wojtek was placed in a local zoo where he was known to appear every once in a while, known to appear at a child's birthday party. Fellow servicemen from his unit were also known to come by and feed him lit cigarettes, where he also sadly died. In his honor, the Polish artillery unit changed its logo to a bear holding an artillery shell. In the Second World War, British Lieutenant General Commander Gerard Broadmead's Roop was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross because a German admiral who witnessed his gallantry in action wrote to the British and recommended the award. There was a huge fight about African Americans using the public pool in Mr. Rogers' actual neighborhood, so he made an episode on his show where he and an African American guest were sharing a kiddie pool and talking about being nice to people even if they look or sound different. He taught a whole generation that racism isn't fair or right. The actor in the show was supposed to be a police officer, and Rogers actually dried his feet. The entire show was a very gentle and very subtle and ultimately very profound way of saying F you to bigots. During the filming of Gone with the Wind in 1939 on the Atlanta movie set, there was a long line of porta potties, each with a sign that said either white or colored. Lenny Blewett, an African-American extra, went to Clark Gable's dressing room and asked to speak to him. Gable immediately got on the phone and yelled at the director that if the signs weren't taken down, then they didn't have Clark Gable as Rhett Butler. And seeing as filming was put off for 2 years just to get Gable, that was one heck of a threat. Apparently Gable even accepting Blewett to enter his dressing room was considered a big thing, as Blewett was so low down the movie pecking order that he was not even going to be credited. I wonder if people back then complained as much as certain people do today when Hollywood got involved with politics. Oh, let's be honest, they always have and they always will. Besides, during World War II, Qantas Airlines has never had a fatal commercial jet plane crash since its formation in 1921. They've never had a single fatal commercial jet crash and haven't had any fatal propeller plane crashes since 1951. They came close in 2010 though, with Qantas Flight 32. And they give beautiful pajamas. Pugs were bred by the Chinese to sit on the laps of emperors. They were quite literally designed to be lazy. The official breed of the House of Orange was the pug. This was because Prince William was alerted to Spanish assassins by his loyal pug, Pompey. How's that for a backup fact? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mr. Rogers always said he was feeding his fish out loud because he heard that a little girl who was blind was worried about them, so he audibly said it so she wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Not really a historical figure, but one that we all know. Mr. Rogers definitely counts as a historical figure, and you can't change my mind. John Stark, one of the rescuers of the remaining survivors of the Donner Party. Apparently, this 220-pound beast of a man rescued all 9 children by carrying them out of a deep sunken snow pit, and laughed and joked with them the whole time. In Summit Valley, the remaining rescuers discussed what to do and took a vote to only save 2 of the children in starved camp. That might have been all they could manage. The others would have to stay behind. John Stark would not abide that. That meant 9 people, mostly children, would die on the mountain, exposed to elements down in a very deep hole in the snow. John Stark decided he'd save all 9. Already shouldering a backpack with provisions, blankets, and an axe, he picked up 1 or 2 of the smaller children, carried them a little ways, then went back for the others. Then he repeated the process again and again and again. To galvanize morale, he laughed and told the youngsters they were so light from months of mouse-sized rations that he would carry them all simultaneously if only his back were broad enough. Once they were out of the snow, he would eat and rest, he said, but not before. He saved all 9. James Breen, one of those in the pit at Starved Camp, later said, "To his great bodily strength and unexcelled courage, myself and others owe our lives. There was probably no other man in California at that time who had the intelligence, determination, and what was absolutely necessary to have in that emergency." After Commodore Perry forced the opening of Japan to foreign trade, Japan signed many unequal treaties with Western nations. The 1888 Mexican-Japanese Treaty was the first time a Western nation treated Japan as an equal. In the late 1930s, fascism was advancing through the world and no one dared oppose it. except for Mexico. Mexico was the only country that openly protested against the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, Italian and German involvement in the Spanish Civil War, along with the USSR, and finally, the German annexation of Austria. In Vienna, we named the square Mexikoplatz, Mexican Square, in honor of Mexico being the only country that protested the Third Reich's annexation of Austria. Horton Hears a Who was written for a Japanese friend of Dr. Seuss immediately following World War II. He wrote it as an allegory about the importance of forgiveness and humanity, in a time when much of the world was still bitter at Japan for their role in the war. Horton represents the United States who speaks up for Whoville, the Japanese, to remind them that a person is a person no matter how small. During the Crusades, when Richard the Lionheart had a fever, all he wanted at the moment was some fruit and a cold drink. His enemy, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt who had seized control over Jerusalem, heard the news and sent him peaches, pears, and a shipment of ice from a mountain. When he heard that King Richard's horse had been killed, he sent him a bunch of new horses and a stable boy. When boys were shipwrecked on a deserted island, they actually did a great job of solving interpersonal conflict, creating a situation that is essentially the opposite of Lord of the Flies. The boys had set up a small commune with a food garden, hollowed-out tree trunks to store water, a gymnasium with curious weights, a badminton court, chicken pens, and a permanent fire. Kolo fashioned a makeshift guitar from a piece of driftwood, half a coconut shell, and 6 steel wires salvaged from their wrecked boat. They lived better than some of us do. Humans are social animals. We generally don't devolve into chaos unless we have to. In 1952, Albert Einstein declined an offer to become the second president of the State of Israel. Napoleon was once nearly killed by being trampled by hundreds of rabbits. He organized a hunt to celebrate a victory, but the guy got tame rabbits instead of wild ones. Instead of running when released, they looked directly to who they recognized as the guy in charge, Napoleon, because they knew the guy in charge meant food. Long story short, they all charged him. He ran, he got severely trampled, and injured. I couldn't make this crap up if I tried. As a history graduate who loves that period, I had no idea that this had happened. It's amazing and totally in keeping with Bonaparte being a magnificent general to the public and kind of ridiculous in his personal life. There is a Lions student in Venice that has Viking runes graffiti on it. The fact that the message is "Kilroy was here" is so beautiful to me. Norsemen also wrote graffiti on the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, back when it was called Constantinople. It's taught in Ireland, but I don't know about the US. When we had the potato famine, millions of Irish were dying and emigrating, and the Choctaw tribe heard this, and despite being extremely poor, they managed to raise I think around $200. And now we've helped them out and raised $1.5 million to help them with COVID-19. That's about $6,500 in today's money. There's also a monument in Cork called the Kindred Spirit dedicated to the Choctaw tribe that was built in honor of the tribes. Imagine that kind of togetherness on a worldwide scale. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were a few Supreme Court cases about the color of margarine. The dairy industry couldn't compete as well with margarine dyed the color of butter, so some states tried to pass laws saying margarine had to be pink, which the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional. However, they also decided that yellow margarine was defrauding the public, so for a while margarine was sold white with a packet of yellow dye that you could mix in at home. In conclusion, they couldn't believe it wasn't butter. The family responsible for inventing the method of making margarine yellow during production lived close to my old neighborhood. Friends who would visit would ask about their huge house, and I always found it hilarious to explain how they got most of their wealth. Benjamin Franklin loved butterballs. Also, flatulating, naturalism, and doing the deed with old ladies. I mean, yeah, but who doesn't love those things? Tutankhamun's most prized possession was his meteoric iron dagger. Museum visitors are impressed by the gold instead. In Tutankhamun's day, meteoric iron would have been rare on an unimaginable scale, whereas gold was the standard currency every merchant had had. In the present day, anyone with $20 can buy meteoric iron trinkets on Etsy, whereas gold is hardly seen in quantities larger than a ring or necklace. On Christmas Day 1914, both sides of World War I celebrated Christmas together with songs and games. This type of celebration happened over the whole front in Belgium and France. The soldiers talked to each other like they weren't in war together. Many soldiers wrote in their diary that they didn't expect the enemies to be so kind and friendly, and that they wanted to meet with them when the war was over. But a few days later, the leaders of the armies found out about the celebrations and forbid any future meetings between the two sides. There were a few attempts to reconnect during Easter and Christmas, but the soldiers who attempted were punished or killed. An actual true fact about Liechtenstein is that Switzerland accidentally invaded Liechtenstein during a Swiss army exercise, when some soldiers got lost and accidentally walked into Liechtenstein, on 2 separate occasions. So Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein twice. The Chicago Public Library originated with a donation of books from Queen Victoria following the Great Chicago Fire. She assumed the city's library had been burned down. Homework was originally a punishment for bad students, and now it's a regular thing. Pirate ships were actually pretty great, relatively speaking. They were very democratic, and pirate crews were pretty well cared for. Also, they took assault against women pretty seriously, i.e., they killed you for it. Also, pirates were really rare. The vast majority of seafaring raiders were privateers, which were basically mercenary ships who were hired by a country to attack the shipping of an enemy nation. If you kept everything for yourself, pirates. If you paid your fair share to your monarch, privateer. There was a Scotsman named Bill Millen who stood on the beaches at Normandy during D-Day, calmly playing the bagpipes as shells and machine gun fire streaked past him. The Germans didn't shoot him because they figured he must have been insane. Pipers had traditionally been used in battle by Scottish and Irish soldiers. However, the use of bagpipes was restricted to rear areas by the time of the Second World War, by the British Army. Lovat, nevertheless, ignored these orders and ordered Millen, then aged 21, to play. When Private Millen demurred, citing the regulations, he recalled later, Lord Lovat replied, "Ah, but that's the English War Office. You and I are both Scottish, and it doesn't apply." When persecuted Zoroastrians from Persia came to the kingdom of Sanjan in the west coast of India as refugees, the king wasn't sure that he wanted to offer them refuge, so he sent them a full glass of milk, implying his kingdom was full. The leader of the Zoroastrians added some sugar to the milk and sent it back to imply the refugees would become part of the kingdom and make it sweeter. They got to stay, and though they're a micro-minority, they're one of the most successful communities which has left its imprint on every aspect of India. Under a Supreme Court ruling in the 1800s, tomatoes are considered a vegetable because you can't make a dessert out of them. The ruling came from California having tariffs on fruits because at the time it was believed that only people with a bit of wealth could buy fruit, because they're only really used to make a dessert. Tomatoes were part of the tariff, so people protested, and the Supreme Court removed tomatoes from the tariff, meaning they aren't a fruit in the eyes of the law. I was on vacation in Germany over spring break. They have these frog fences. These fences keep the frogs from crossing the roads and getting run over. At the end of the day, somebody comes and gathers the frogs and helps them across the road. Not only in Germany, and fences are not only to keep the frogs safe, but also the drivers. So many frogs might pass a stretch of road that it gets slippery from all the crushed frogs and somebody could get hurt. But where I live, they started installing blue reflectors on the road markers which are designed to warn wildlife, mostly deer, and keep them from running onto the roads. Captain Morgan actually existed. The face of the well-loved rum, Captain Morgan brand, was a real guy. He was a Welsh privateer who fought alongside the English against the Spanish in the Caribbean in the 1660s and 1670s. His first name was Henry, and he was knighted by King Charles II of England. His exact birth date is unknown, but it was sometime around 1635. He died in Jamaica in 1688, apparently very rich. Henry Morgan is largely regarded as one of, if not the greatest pirates who ever lived. When you run down the list of notable pirates whose names you recognize today, like Black Bart Roberts, Blackbeard, Captain Kidd, Calico Jack Rackham, Charles Vane, and the others, they all had one thing in common. Not a one of them lived to enjoy much, if any, of their ill-gotten gains. They were either killed in battle, captured and wound up dancing the hempen jig, or left to rot in a gibbet. Henry Morgan actually won the game of piracy, if you consider the end goal to get rich and live the good life, by actually retiring, receiving a royal appointment as governor of Jamaica, bought a plantation, and spent his remaining years actually enjoying his wealth and drinking with his friends. What's an unethical way that people save money? I work downtown, in a city where monthly parking is easily $150 or more per spot. My wife and I both have to drive due to schedules, so it would be double that. Found out that the casino downtown gives you free parking daily if you bet $10. So we go and play roulette daily. She bets $10 on red and I bet $10 on black, and each ask for our parking validation. One of us always wins, which doubles one of the $10 bets. So we get our $20 back. Boom! Free parking. There's been the odd time it's hit zero. In that case, we each just lose $5 each and parking costs us $10 total for the day. I accidentally discovered that the laundry machines in my building take 20 euro-cent coins instead of the $2 coins. The last time I was in Germany, I saved as many as I could, and now a load of laundry costs about 50 cents instead of $4. Imagine the laundromat owner going to collect the change. Who the frick is depositing euros? I only found out about it when I paid $2 into the machine and it spat out the 20-cent piece. So somebody else out there is doing it too. They'll never catch me. I went to Thailand and the 10 baht coin looks nearly identical to the 2 euro coin, so I took a few. If I'm on a festival or in a club, I sometimes pay with them because everything is overpriced and dark anyway. I just don't use it in normal shops. They're around 25 euro cents each, so it's a great return on investment. I don't get how you guys are able to use similar-sized coins in vending machines. I have enough trouble getting the machine to accept the actually correct coin whenever I try, let alone one that's a bit different. I never got removed from an employee discount plan for a job I left almost 7 years ago. I get 25% off every month on my phone and internet. Similar but not unethical. My work pays me $40 a month for me to use my phone as my work contact number. My monthly bill is $35. When I was in 6th grade, they would give IOU slips to anyone that forgot their money for lunch. You were supposed to put your name and they would bill you later. I always wrote Cornelius Origami. My name is not Cornelius Origami. Poor Cornelius Origami. He got charged for so many lunches wrongfully. The financial burden caused him to eventually fold. I do like to imagine there's a cartoonish figure in this individual's town who's charged a fortune in lunch fees every month, and his monocle always pops out when he gets hit with the bill. When checking into a hotel, ask if they give Walmart employees a discount. More often than not, you get a 10% discount, and I've never been asked to prove it. Does this hotel give Walmart employees a discount? Yes, may I see your employee ID? I don't really work there, I'm just really curious about their employee benefits. I still use student discounts whenever I can. Not a student. I graduated in 2013. My senior year, they came up with a new ID card which doesn't expire until 2018. My college ID doesn't have an expiration date. I've been out of college nearly 4 years now and still use it. I buy my movie tickets at the automated kiosks in the theater, but I select the senior citizen's price. Spoiler alert, I'm not a senior citizen. The high school kid ripping tickets always gives a slight pause and then decides it's not worth the hassle to call me out on it. In the 90s, I was starting my last year of school. You could have school dinners paid for in advance termly by your parents, or you could bring a packed lunch. I was a packed lunch kid, but if you forgot your packed lunch, you could get a school dinner and pay for it the next day. One day, I forgot my lunch, so I got in the school dinner queue and waited to be served. I thought they'd realize I wasn't a school dinner child and tell me to bring the money tomorrow, but they didn't. The food was actually not bad, and the next day I tried my luck again. They just assumed my parents had paid and nobody bothered to check. I got free school dinners for about a year. At my school, they had free lunches for kids who were low income, but to avoid embarrassment, they were given cards that looked identical to everyone else's card. The computer would just not charge their account. My friend would just give his card to other people and they'd get free lunch. The system had no check to see if the same card bought 7 lunches in one day. I haven't bought paper towels in 2 years because I've been stealing napkins from Chipotle every week. I didn't say I ate there, guys, just that I take the napkins. And yes, it's a crappy thing to do. But isn't that kind of the point of this story grouping? Back when payphones were a thing, you could carefully shove the fat McDonald's straws into the change slot in my city and get free calls. Dollars to dimes, it was a homeless guy that figured this out, who just thought he'd try taking a sip of whatever fluid might have collected in the payphone's coin reservoir. Hey, you never know. Sneaking into meetings you're not invited to and stealing donuts and kolaches. I pretend that I'm gay. The gym I go to charges $50 less if you register as a couple and not as single. I don't have a significant other, so my best male friend and I registered as a gay couple. The first day, the manager almost asked us to make out to prove it. He decided it was homophobic, so he stopped. When we come in, he's always staring while we use the machines together, like he wants to catch us doing something sexual. This sounds like the plot for a ruckus buddy comedy. Starts out with the buds pretending to be a couple for the gym membership. Then they start doing other couple things to save money. Then they realize they're in love. A Frenchman here. Some people create groups where they give 5 to 10 euros a month. The subway in Paris costs about 60 euros a month. And they use the subway or other public transport without paying. When one of them gets caught, the group uses the money to pay the fine. So, like an insurance company for fare evasion, I'd be more worried about the guy running it taking the money and disappearing. When we were kids, we discovered the hotel by the beach had a free brunch thing on the top floor every day. You needed to use a keycard in the elevator to access the top floor, but we would go to the floor under it and walk up the last flight. I assume some kind of fire code restriction was why the stairs weren't key-coded. As dumb kids, we were greedy and went too often and got kicked out eventually, but it was nice while it lasted. They had a deal so that their guests could use the pool at the hotel next door too, and no one ever checked, so we would do that as well. I pay for Netflix. I have 3 friends who use the account. They always pay for pizza and snacks at any social gatherings. I've been a bit depressed and haven't spoken with my friend for a few weeks. He just changed the password and I don't want to ask him what it is right away because it's effed up that I'll only talk to him to get the Netflix password. In high school, I had a good friend who worked solo in a small fast food burger place inside a gas station, East Coast chain called Bullets. I would order a small side of fries and he'd give me $30 worth of chicken fingers, bacon burgers, onion rings, curly fries, etc. Over the summer, large groups of friends would go and order $10 worth of food and 12 people would eat like kings. We did this for years and nothing ever came of it except my friends and I all got fat during the summer, eating 4,000 calories from that place most days. Thanks, Christian, you're a bro. When I was a kid, one of my friend's mothers, a pediatrician, would dilute children's vaccines to save money. Rightfully, she lost her medical license. Jesus Christ! How much would that woman save by doing that? I can't imagine it would be more than one small shopping trip per month. And pediatricians are generally paid all right, aren't they? Insanity. When I got the cooked breakfast option from the canteen at work, you're allowed 5 items. I always take extra bacon and hide it under the beans. That's free bacon. In a similar note, the food court in my college only allows you to take 1 item out. I take 2 cookies at a time by hiding one in my pocket and eating one as I go out. All for those tasty frickin' cookies. When I was 8, I went with my mum to set up my first bank account after an uncle gave me £100 as a Christmas gift. He lived abroad, so I didn't see him often. For some reason, they set it up wrong, so the system recorded me as a member of staff. I'm now 29, and I still have the same bank account. And now, I get offered staff rates on loans and credit cards. It's great! Does anyone else use GameStop as a bank? I got really teed off with the US bank because I kept overdrafting my accounts even though I opted out of overdrafting. And the same thing happened with my credit union when I got a debit card. Now whenever I get paid, I go pre-order a whole crapload of games. Whenever I need money, I go to the nearest GameStop and ask for my money back on a game I don't want and make a withdrawal. The lines are shorter at GameStop than at the bank, and I can trade in old games and have money go straight into my savings account. GameStops are just as prevalent as banks in my town, and I work at a mall, so it's even more convenient than running an errand to the bank or using an ATM and getting charged. The GameStop people are starting to catch on that I'm just moving money around and only buying one pre-ordered game a year, if that, but there isn't crap they can do about it. The best part is, since I always pre-order every game coming out, I'm still guaranteed to get all of the exclusive content, whether or not I'm sure I want a certain game. It's like they're rewarding me for banking with them. I don't think GameStop is FDIC insured. Whole Foods gives a 5-cent discount if you bring your own bag. I pick up a single habanero pepper, free pepper. If someone went to all that trouble, I'd say go for it. If I'm planning on going out and fancy a certain restaurant, I go online maybe 2 weeks in advance, sign up to their mailing list, and give my birthday as being the day I'm planning on going. Most places give you some sort of freebie for your birthday. As a totally ethical aside to what this guy is doing, signing up for loyalty programs at any and all of your local restaurants will save you a ton of money when you go out. Every day I get email coupons for discounted food, BOGO deals, free appetizers or desserts, and of course the free birthday food. The week of my birthday is a tour of coupon redemptions. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In DC, we have a computer program that lets you pay for your metro fare with pre-tax payroll deductions. In theory, you're supposed to have 2 metro cards and only use the pre-tax card for commuting to and from work. I've never met a soul that carried said 2 cards. As some of you have pointed out, and I've now realized, there is no clear federal rule that demands this. That said, I've poked around on a few different employers' websites to see what the Smart Benefits form looks like, and many of them have similar language to this example, not from my employer but a different one. I buy my college textbooks as ebooks on Amazon. I remove DRM and convert them to PDFs. I return ebooks to Amazon claiming something along the lines of, I decided to drop the class, free college textbooks, super easy with Caliber. In most cases where that might not work, I can typically find a torrent, though I'm much more wary of these sources. At this point, it occurs to me that it may be necessary to warn you all, but do this at your own risk. It's not unheard of for Amazon to slam down the ban hammer if they're suspicious of fraudulent activity, and evidently, when it comes down hard. I commute to work by train and I have a subscription ticket for it, but I don't pay what I really have to. I have to change trains on my way, but the ticket really only is for one train route. No one checks all the zones marked on my ticket, only if the date is right. I first drove part of the way by car, but then decided to try and leave the car at home to save me some money. I didn't want to get a pricier ticket to just try it out for 1 week to see if it works, and I get to work on time. I was hoping I don't get controlled, and if I would, I'd come up with a stupid excuse that my car is in the workshop. However, I was controlled, but no problems, no questions. I then decided to always use the train for the whole way to work, even if I had to get a pricier ticket. But I just never got that pricier ticket. Decided to see how long I'd get away with it. So far, no problem. This saves me about £30 per month. I do this for about a year now, and my ticket gets checked almost daily. Servers almost always underreport cash tips to some extent. My wife and I go to the same university. She attends, and I work there. A plus to me working there is that she attends for free. A single parking permit is $850 per person for 2 semesters. We didn't want to have to pay $1,700 for 2 permits, so here is what I did. 1. Purchased my own permit for $850, go to the permit office 2 weeks later, at the beginning of the semester the first 2 weeks are free parking, and I say that either, oh, I just sold my car and forgot I left the permit sticker on it, or I just had my windshield replaced and forgot to take off my permit sticker before they took the windshield. They charge me $40 for the replacement ticket and then mail it to me. And there we go. $890 for 2 permits is much better than $1,700 for 1. The only risk is that they scan the original permit's barcode because it was deactivated when I reported it as lost, but it's been 2 years of doing this trick and they haven't bothered to check it yet. I also used to heat the used stickers on my community college textbooks and sell the books back to the college and get a bit more money for them because they weren't considered used without the sticker. Leave it to students and university personnel to find ways to scrimp and save. Respect, my friends. Let the rich kids make their parents pay these kinds of bills. My girlfriend never put her license plates on her car. 2.5 years into her lease and she still uses the dealer placeholder. This lets her use toll roads and fast lanes without paying. She's never been pulled over, but I bet that's going to be an awkward conversation someday with the way she speeds. Just to clarify, she does pay her registration and receives her plates. She just permanently stores them in her glove box. They are gonna tow her vehicle when she gets pulled. Self-service checkout at the supermarket. No, I don't have any bags, rustle, rustle. You don't need to charge me 5 pence, rustle, rustle, rustle. I bought my PlayStation 4 a little over a year ago, used. Netflix is still signed into the previous owner's account. I wonder if they ever think, who's watching this crap? Let's say you have a relatively new car, no older than 5 years, that needs new tires. Find a rental car company that has your same car and rent it for the day. Go home and swap your wheels with the new car. When you return the car, they don't check tire tread levels, and unless you swapped with bald tires, the mechanics probably won't notice. Also, you're a scumbag if you do this. I was buying makeup last month and used the self-checkout. When I scanned my eyeliner, the machine kept telling me to place the item into the bag. Turns out the eyeliner was too light to register, so I threw a heavier, more expensive piece of makeup into the bag instead, without scanning it. The machine was satisfied then. Got as much student loan as possible from the government, €20,000, even though I don't need it, since the interest rate is so ridiculously low, 0.01% at the moment. Since the inflation is higher than the interest rate, I'm saving money that way. So, my job sent me to Japan several times. The train system is interesting there, so we found fun ways to exploit the system. We figured out how to abuse the heck out of station passes. When you get on any train, you can buy a ticket to your destination, or you can buy a station pass, which is about 50 cents. When you get off, you scan the station pass and it calculates how far you've ridden and charges you the difference. When we got off the plane in Tokyo, we bought a dozen station passes for Tokyo Station. Then, when we arrived at our destination, about $100 fare from Tokyo, we purchased a month-long ticket between adjacent stations. This ticket will let you on and off the train at either of those stations for a month. It's very cheap because fare between two close stations is only a few bucks. Travel to Tokyo, hop on a base station, use month pass, hop off in Tokyo, use station pass. Cost for $100 ride, 50 cents. Travel home, hop on in Tokyo with station pass, hop off at base station with month pass. Cost for $100 ride, 50 cents. Also fun for sightseeing. You can ride the trains all over Japan for free as long as you don't leave the stations. Buy rotisserie chicken from a store, eat 3/4 of it, and return it claiming it was undercooked. I had a lady do this every week at a store I used to work at. I hated her with every ounce of my being. And that's why cooked chickens are $8.99 instead of $5.99. Fun facts, if you have a Costco membership, you can literally return anything. I worked in the bouquet department and we had a guy return flowers he bought the previous year's Valentine's Day, completely wilted and crumbly. He said they didn't last long and due to their return policy, we had to return it. I don't encourage taking advantage of this because Costco is a fantastic company to work for, but if you're in a bad situation, you can use it to your advantage. You really can return anything after any amount of time. My uncle was shopping for a new barbecue at Costco. He gets talking to the salesman or someone about how his previous barbecue, which he bought at Costco, had worked for 10 years but was starting to go. They told him to return it and exchange it for a new one. He did that and they accepted it, after 10 years of use. As a college student, stealing silverware from the dining hall has saved me a lot of money. Plot twist, your tuition is covering the cost of replacing silverware stolen by previous students. So really, then you're losing money if you don't steal the forks. Some of these stories have made the narrator aware for the first time of the completely normal fact of life of prices being inflated to adjust for the risk of theft. You jerks, I'm paying more because of you? If I can't find it on demand for free or on Netflix, I'm pirating it. The problem is that I wouldn't mind watching something on a TV channel most of the time, but I'm not going to pay $15 a month just so I can watch one TV show at the time the TV channel broadcasts it with ads. For half the price, you have Netflix. I can legally share Netflix, so it's only $4. It's full HD and 5.1 sound as well. What's the downside? Nothing. So I'm simply not going to pay that much. What's the point of that? Sometimes, when the bus driver isn't looking, I put in $2 and a nickel instead of $2 and a dime. Oh, you disgust me. Someone else is paying for my internet. A few months ago, I went online to see why I haven't been getting a bill, expecting to see a huge balance and a disconnect notice. Instead, I see my account is set up for autopay, with someone else's credit card. This has been going on for a little over a year and I do not intend to raise any flags about it. In my city, you can either load a monthly subscription or just load a set amount of money into your bus pass. A monthly is $100. So when I was busing to work, I used to just load $50 and not tap my card on morning rides. I would only tap on my way home because the Trainspo cops were more likely to be patrolling in the afternoons. Now I drive to work, but the monthly parking pass is $200. Ain't nobody got time to pay for that, so I just park on the side of the street where there are 2-hour parking zones. But I usually don't move my car every 2 hours. It seems those rarely get checked because in the 2 months I've been doing this, I've only got 2 tickets, at $50 a ticket. It's still the cheapest option, but I don't even bother paying the tickets because I work in a different province than the one I live in. And as far as I can tell, there's no collaboration between the two vis-a-vis traffic tickets, so they don't follow up to make sure you've paid it. Not exactly unethical, but I dumpster dive. This year, I've picked up a microwave, a nearly new $200 DeLonghi espresso maker, a 52-inch Sanyo TV, technically a dumpster, and everything in it is private property. My landlord likes me a lot because I've been in the same house for 5+ years renting, so I get 2 parking spaces included for free. I only have 1 car, so I've been renting the other spot to different neighbors for $65 a month. Free parking and $780 a year for no work on my part. What's the best case of instant karma that you've ever seen? While working for the fire department on a call for a multi-vehicle rollover accident on the interstate, we got on the interstate 1 exit away, running into traffic, so we moved over to the emergency lane with lights and siren blaring. We were about halfway there and a BMW pulls in front of us trying to cut through traffic. He didn't even look. I laid into the air horn and he came to a complete stop with his middle finger out the window. I've had a lot of people do stupid things when seeing lights coming at them, but this guy was being a butt for the sake of being a butt. He got out of his car and started screaming at us. Meanwhile, he was blocking the only fire engine and 2 ambulances available. People were really hurt half a mile away, and he was making his stand because we honked our air horn at him for blocking us. I looked out at my mirror to see a highway patrolman running between lanes towards us. He was teed off. BMW boy was immediately arrested, his pretty car got pushed out of the way into a ditch, and he went to jail. The people in the accident were hurt badly, and 2 cars had to be cut open to get people extricated from bent metal. It was frustrating. I don't know how you didn't beat the living crap out of him. I would surely not have had the patience. Watching him get tackled and dragged into the mud and then having to get his car pushed into the same mud kind of made it all worth it. Used to commute to DC from 40 miles away. Driving home one evening, this guy decides he has to merge into my lane now. Beeping and all, he pushes me off the road. The car behind me was a cop. As soon as I was on the shoulder, lights and sirens went off and the dude was pulled over. Where I used to live was a rural area on the outskirts of a small city in Australia. I was heading home from work one night and the road back to my place is several kilometers long and dead straight. Cane fields on either side and no streetlights, so it was very dark. Many people speed down the road because it's a back road and rarely patrolled by the police. I was driving along doing the speed limit, 100 kilometers per hour, and this guy comes roaring up behind me with his high beams on. He sits right behind me, then tears around to overtake and takes off doing at least 120 kilometers per hour. Less than a minute later, he must have hit the dirt shoulder and he starts to lose control, before hitting a slight dip and he literally flies through the air into a cane paddock. At this point, it's a mixture of absolute shock and wanting to laugh my butt off. Then the red and blue lights flash up ahead, not 50 meters from the guy. I'd never seen a cop on this road before that night, so I couldn't believe it. I pulled up to ask if he needed any help from me and he goes, "Nah, love, you get home. I got this frickin' turkey." Double instant karma. Why is it that any authority figure, be it pilot, cop, or businessman, suddenly becomes so much more charming with that accent? Or maybe the New Zealanders watching would disagree with me. Anyway, on with more stories. It was my own karma. I was in 8th grade. I was standing on a bench when I watched some girl fall over in the yard. I started laughing and pointing and then went to lean back onto the fence that was behind the bench. Turns out it had broken off where I was standing and I fell straight through and into the mud. I'm in the New York City subway. A guy elbows me out of the way to get into the turnstile first, yelling vaguely that he has a train to catch. No crap. Through the turnstile, turn the corner, and there are a few cops set up near a folding table, and he gets pulled for a random search. I work at a grocery store. I was stocking instant noodles on a big sale display. All I had was a cheap 2-step stool, you know, the one with the bar that runs across the top shelf. Reaching down to the stool from the shelf I was standing on was about 3 feet. I had a 60% chance my foot would land on the top bar and collapse the thing. I asked a coworker to use his shoulder as a handle as I got down. My supervisor called me a princess for getting assistance. Soon after, he was stocking the 2-liter Coke bottles on a sales display. He tried to get down. He took the 40% success rate jump onto the step, hit the top bar, the stepladder collapsed. He broke his arm and took down half the display. I just clocked out and left before they told me to clean up the spilled soda all over the place. Sometimes the malevolent gods of retail can smile on a poor worker. The beauty of that moment is truly unable to be explained to those who have never been a retail worker before. It's not that they smile upon one worker, but rather direct their malevolence towards another in a larger portion. I was driving home on the highway during a horrible blizzard at night. The roads were extremely slick and dangerous. I was going about 30 miles per hour. My daughter was a newborn and it was the first time I'd ever driven in the snow with her. I was nervous. Some jerk in a huge truck is doing 65, passing everyone in the slow lane and just being really risky and ignorant of the conditions and other drivers in general. He passed me and I was like, "You're gonna crash, bro." Right at that moment, the guy fishtails, loses control, and crashes into a ditch. Don't worry, I'm not a sadist, he was completely fine. I know this because I saw him emerge from the truck and do a little angry freakout dance. His truck wasn't fine. That's what you get for endangering others during a blizzard. During a drive through Philly in standstill traffic, some butthole decides to use the shoulder as a lane to cut in line. The vehicle he ended up cutting off was a state trooper, an instant whoop whoop, and told to pull off the highway over a loudspeaker. I couldn't stop laughing. The time I had my shoes stolen. I was 17, went to a party where there were kids from 2 different high schools. When I went inside, I took off my brand new Nike Air Matter shoes that I'd just brought for $140. Hours later, when I went to leave, my shoes were gone. We had an idea of who'd taken them, a guy from the other school, but didn't have any proof. I was so sad and so embarrassed. I had to drive home in my socks. Long story short, a week later, Monica, the girl who threw the party, shows up on my doorstep holding something behind her back. Turns out she went to a party and saw the guy who stole my shoes, wearing them. When he took them off after a smoke break, she snagged them. Now, standing in front of me, she reveals my Nikes. She told me the best part was watching him look for them, just like I had, and then leaving in his socks. Walking down the San Antonio River walk, the guy in front of us got pooped on by a bird. My friend turned to me and says, "Sucks to suck." That friend literally got pooped on as well, right after the words had left his mouth. Butthole kid in middle school kept trying to steal my cell phone. It was a cheap flip phone, but he'd do it just to tee me off. Our school had a rule that you couldn't have your phone out in class. Teacher left the classroom for a second to have a brief word with an administrator. This jerk grabbed my phone. The teacher came back in a moment later and caught him red-handed with my phone out. She wouldn't believe it wasn't his phone. He got detention. Back in high school, I was kind of being a jerk to a girl I was friends with. Nothing too bad, just some friendly teasing, but still. Then I turned around and fell down a flight of stairs. Even mid-fall, the karma and the justice didn't escape me. We both found it pretty funny. If I've learned anything from similar stories, you guys are happily married now. The narrator has swept the follow-up replies to the story, and this does not in fact seem to be one of those meet-cute type stories. At the end of the day in locker room after gym class, this freshman kid who was really popular and always talked a lot of crap started messing with this guy who was kind of awkward and kind of got picked on a lot. Apparently they got in each other's way in flag football or something. Awkward guy ignores cocky kid for a while until the cocky kid pushed him. Awkward guy had enough and hit the cocky guy in the face 3 times before he hit the ground. Knocked his front teeth out. As we were all leaving school and talking about it, the overall consensus was, well, that's what happens when you talk that much crap. My dog tried to eat my sushi while I was away from the table for 1 second. I came back to missing wasabi and a disgusted-looking dog. The first time I ordered sushi, I was on a date. I thought the wasabi was avocado paste. I stole my date's avocado paste and put a generous amount on all of my sushi bites. I kept repeating, "I had no idea sushi was so effing spicy." My date couldn't figure out what I was talking about as snot ran down my face, as the sushi we shared was definitely not the spicy kind. I finally admitted that I stole the avocado paste, and my date couldn't stop laughing. I totally deserved it. In the UK, kids wear blazers and ties to school, and a common bullying tactic that jerks use is to run up to kids, pull their ties so they get really tightly knotted. On the bus home, the bus was really full, and I was standing in front of one such bully. He grabbed my tie just as the bus had to brake sharply. He lost his footing, and the only thing keeping him upright was the fact that he was holding my tie. He had grabbed the wrong bit, but it wasn't knotted. It simply untied and he fell on his bum. That was the last time I was knotted. In my school, everyone had clip-on ties, and because of the strict dress rules, some bullies would yank them off and wouldn't give them back. However, some people had proper ones, usually as a replacement for losing them. One of my friends had one, and some butthole yanked it really hard, causing said friend to accidentally headbutt the dude in the face, giving him a nosebleed. I was working in a supermarket when a panicked customer came up to me and said he'd accidentally left his cash in the ATM, and had anybody handed it in. I was about to say no when customer B appeared behind him and said he'd been trying to catch up to him. He had been queuing behind him at the ATM and saw what happened, so he had got the money for him. It was £200, so a decent amount. Customer A was super grateful and offered him some of the money, but he wouldn't take it. Customer B then bought a scratch card, scratched it, and found out he'd won £5. Not a whopping amount of karma, but karma nonetheless. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. At a job as a mechanic, I got a part that was completely correct, except the electrical plug was a different shape. I found out after I installed it. For the record, it did plug in, just didn't have long enough prongs to communicate. I had to order the right part again and take this one off and install the right one, all while getting paid to put the correct one on. I lost about 1.3 hours. My coworker laughed and said, "Bet you won't make that mistake again. Pay attention next time." His very next job, he put all 4 tires on backwards. Some tires are directional. I said the same thing to him. I knew I would use it against him. I didn't know it would be that soon. In conclusion, I made a hard-to-spot mistake and a guy made fun of me. His very next job, he made a very easy-to-spot mistake and I made fun of him. My dad told me this story. He was driving from the store when traffic got really bad. About a mile ahead, there was an accident that had brought traffic to a crawl. Crap happens. My dad decided to be patient about it. Others weren't so patient. People began driving on the shoulder in order to get ahead of the traffic. This teased my dad off. We all know how this goes. We do the right thing and are punished for it, whereas these buttholes are skipping in front of traffic and will probably get away with it. He thought about following the stream of cars onto the shoulder but decided he'd do the right thing and wait. As he got closer, he saw 2 cops in the parking lot. One cop was directing all of the shoulder drivers into the parking lot, while the other wrote all of those drivers' tickets. He described it as one of the most satisfying things he's ever seen. I was driving into a construction zone where 3 lanes converged into one. Right at the point it became 1 lane, a car tried to pass me on my right. I slowed down so he wouldn't hit me, but he ran over one of those metal lane dividers. It got caught up in his back right wheel well, and went around a few times. I could see it and hear it make a mess of his fender. Last I saw, he was pulling over to inspect the damage. I banged my knee on the corner of a hotel bed and my husband was laughing his butt off while he was brushing his teeth in the bathroom. As soon as he walked out to the bathroom, he hit his knee in the exact same way and I got to laugh my butt off. Are your butts okay now? More importantly, are they both back on? I saw a guy in a gorgeous sports car, Ferrari I think, honking and yelling at a pedestrian in the crosswalk. Pedestrian had the right of way and was crossing during the signal. Immediately after they passed, the guy guns it and darts around the corner and rear-ends a cop who was in the middle of writing a ticket. There was a truck parked on the street that was just enough to obstruct Ferrari guy's line of sight through the turn. It was glorious. I didn't even see it happen, I just heard the crunch right after he turned the corner. I'll be honest, the vast majority of people I see in sports cars are kind of D-bags. I'm sure there are exceptions, but let's be honest. That kind of money usually has a correlation to a crappy personality. Not instant karma, but I remember in middle school I knew a kid that would go door to door collecting donations for the walkathon, and he'd keep the money for himself. He used the money to buy video games with it. One day he loans his friend his game collection. Said friend moves away with it. This guy at my job could only afford a tuna sandwich for lunch, and someone stole it here and there, and once did so 3 days in a row. He got his revenge by making his sandwich on the 3rd day with really cheap wet cat food. His lunch was left alone after that. I used to be a zookeeper. This B-word was making fun of our llama for looking ugly. The llama was a rescue who had corrective jaw surgery. The B-word pointed and laughed at our llama. The llama spat in her mouth. I gave the llama a treat and told her that she was a good girl. One time in middle school, this guy who was relatively new at our school was making fun of a girl in our class who fell in the hallway in between classes. Coincidentally, this was a girl I had a crush on. He was a little bit of a class clown and was mocking her, making her look stupid and clumsy. Apparently, he misjudged his footing and while attempting to jokingly ape the way she'd fallen, he fell for real and landed squarely on his back in front of everybody. He broke his arm in the process. Passing by him in the hallway, I saw him just lying there, surrounded by adults and staring up at the ceiling, face completely expressionless. He didn't come back to school. Pretty sure he moved after that. I would have too. This absolute moron that I knew in school was trying to get a mentally handicapped kid to do stuff for a jackass-type video in a very nasty, cruel way behind the gym. I was sitting behind a car smoking green herb in the parking lot. Special kid is not dumb enough to play this game, and this butthole decides to get him to hold the camera. People are heckling and calling out suggestions, nothing interesting happens. Then someone carries out a basketball, puts it on the concrete sidewalk, then hands the jerk an aluminium baseball bat and mimes hitting the basketball, like splitting a log with an axe. Jerk winds up, brings it down, and I hear a blank, and his head is shooting back with blood everywhere. From where I was and how much herb I'd smoked, I thought he smashed his skull. The bat clatters like 20 feet behind him and he goes down backwards. The bat bounced, nailed him in the eyebrow, split it open, and knocked him the frick out. He was okay, but had a scar and a heck of a black eye for a few weeks. And the whole time, the mentally handicapped kid he'd been trying to humiliate on camera is filming and laughing so hard he's fricking crying. Security didn't believe that nobody hit the jerk until he showed them the video. I saw someone tailgating another car on a highway. There was a huge CRTV lying in the road. The tailgatee changes lanes at the last minute and the tailgater slammed full speed into the TV. It was hilarious. That a police car rounded the corner just in time for me and a guy to tell him that a bunch of kids had just thrown a firework at the owner of a nearby store. It was literally moments later and they could see the kids running down the road from where we stopped them. I've got two, can't really decide on which one is best. The first, driving to work during a snowstorm. Pretty much everyone is taking it easy because snow. Some guy in an Infiniti FX35 thinks that he's invincible, so he comes driving down the road, probably 15 miles an hour faster than everyone else. So he goes past me and I don't see him again until the fork in the road. Mr. Superhero went into the turn too fast and slammed into an iron fence at the triangle dividing the two streets. He was fine because he was outside his car, looking at it with a look of confusion. The second story was driving home one night around 10 p.m. I'm stopped at a red light in front of a shopping mall about midway down the block. The east and westbound road is separated by a pedestrian island. Someone pulls up next to me at the light, looks around, and drives through the red light. Suddenly, from the opposite side of the street, red and blue lights, a whoop whoop of a siren, and an NYPD SUV hops the island and pulls the guy over. The police weren't camped out or anything, just waiting at the red light on their side of the street. Right place at the right time. This happened a couple of months back, young driver in a brand new Merc dangerously overtaking me and others on a single lane. Caught up with him at the next set of lights, 2-lane, mine turning, his going straight, both with a car ahead of us. We did the universal wind down your window sign and suggested he cool his driving or he'll get into a crash. He told me to F off. Lights go green, he boots it off the line, smacks into the back of the car in front. Bonnet bent in half, radiator blown, airbags deployed. I got out, checked the other poor innocent driver was unharmed, and gave him my details as a witness. Gave the other driver the old "told you so" and carried on my way. A guy in a Charger was weaving through traffic and passing at high speed in a work zone on the interstate, and I said to the other person in the car, "It'd be nice to see one of these buttholes get busted just once." A minute later, a state trooper swings out from the tree line on an access road and pulls the guy over. Double fines for speeding in a work zone, by the by. My best friend's mum has always been like a second mum to me, at least since my bestie and I were in 4th grade. This year for Easter, she invited me over for dinner with her family, so I decided to get her a quick gift, which included some dog toys for her huskies, some flowers, a thank you card, and a scratch-off ticket. She'd always been so kind to me. She even writes the same sweet, motherly messages on my Facebook timeline as she does for her own daughters. That's probably why I cried with utter joy when the ticket I bought her won her $1,000. It wasn't necessarily instant karma since she'd been good to me for more than 16 years, but she won some money in an instant. Nice to have one of these not just be bloody vengeance, even if, admittedly, those are just a little more satisfying. In elementary school, all the kids went to the bus stop together. As we walked, one of the second graders ran into a lamp post. One of my classmates couldn't stop laughing. We crossed the street and he was still laughing his butt off and didn't look where he was going. You know what's coming. He ran into a lamp post as well and instantly got laughed at. Was at a show jumping event, and a little girl went up to a famous show jumper with her book of famous riders and asked him to sign it. She couldn't find him in the book and asked if he could help her. He responded, "Find it yourself," and walked away. In his final round after the incident, worth $100,000, first jump the horse stopped and he fell face first onto the floor. Not gonna lie, I was laughing. The best one was a real frickin' goon at my school. He got up on the roof of a shed to pee on kids as they left the shed. But this dumb bully fell off the roof, resulting in a broken wrist, injured wang, and humiliation. I remember a kid climbing on the roof of a classroom to get conkers to throw down at people walking past. He threw one at someone in the year below who caught it magnificently, then returned it with absolute precision directly into the guy on the roof's left eye. The weird thing was, no one said anything. We all saw it and just accepted that the karma had indeed been dealt. The kid on the roof climbed down and went to the matron. I was walking to the store with a friend when we were 13. We heard someone yelling at us and turned around to see some kid about 50 feet away. He was yelling and calling us every homophobic word you knew at that age. As we started to walk over to confront him, he did a 180 and started running while turning. Well, he spun around and ran face first into a tree and hit it hard enough that he fell to the ground from the impact. We couldn't stop laughing, and hopefully that was enough embarrassment for him to learn a lesson. People who've used a bar's safe word drink to get out of a bad situation, what happened? Had a creeper at a hotel bar who wouldn't leave me alone despite my best efforts to ignore him. I even asked him politely and not so politely to leave me alone. He actually kept trying to touch me and told me that I was going to go to his room with him. He had a strange, angry edge too. So I gave the bartender a help me look and said to him something like, "I need to talk to you about that thing with my tab, remember?" and asked if I could do it when the bar closed, which was like 5 minutes later. He looked at me and said, "Give me a minute," and made a phone call and then said, "So they can help you at the front desk." Meanwhile, Creeper is literally not leaving me alone and is still trying to actually hang on to me and keeps talking. So I start to leave and Creeper is trying to kiss me and pull me close, but I tell him I have business at the front desk and walk up to the desk. There are about 3 employees there, and I said, "The bartender said you could help me with my tab." And one of the employees says, "Oh, I need you to come here with me to fix that." And she says to the guy, "You need to stay here, this is personal business." The employee, a woman, and I start to walk away, and of course the creeper followed us. She actually walked me to a staff elevator and he tried to get on with us. She told him, "Get out of here and leave us alone." As a male hotel employee came up to him just then and the elevator door shut. The employee walked me literally to my room door and stayed until I had it locked on the other side. I've had, and still occasionally do have, guys hit on me, but never anything like this before. I actually wrote a long email to the hotel corporate office and the actual hotel about the bartender and 2 employees, because they helped me in what I would say was above and beyond. The guy really frightened me. I've been as brand loyal as possible to that hotel chain ever since. Another time, I was in a bar in the States. I'd been a regular here for a little bit, and I knew the bar staff. A new guy comes in and starts hitting on the bartender. At first, he just seems to play along with it, so I ignore it. It's not my business. Time goes by, and he starts getting more and more aggressive on hints at her. He wants her number, but she's giving him excuses like, "Oh, my phone is broke right now," and eventually she says, "Look, enough, no." At this point, I'm paying attention, and he says she's just shy and she knows she would like it. She gets upset and she asks him to leave. I tell him he should leave. He ignores me and is still trying to smooth things over with her. Manager comes over, who is also a woman, and tells him he needs to leave. I tell him he needs to leave now. By this point, there was a group of 3 construction guys who had gotten up and come over to the bar, and he was told he needs to pay and leave right now, or we, the guys, will take care of him ourselves. At this point, he decides to pay and leave. The manager gave us all a round of free drinks. The guy came in again the next day when the owner was there. The owner called the police and trespassed him. Frick yes, construction guys. This is a kind of non-violent vigilante justice I think we can all get behind, right? Not a safe word per se, but my mum and friend went to a bar and a guy mugged her friend outside. She entered with her purse messed up and holding a shoe, and their male friend called over to the owner. He called out something like, "Woman down," and a bunch of men stood and went outside to search for this guy. Turns out a few years prior, a woman there was a victim of the unspeakable act. After that, the owner established a code phrase with the regulars for if a friend gets attacked. The place looks like a dive bar at first glance, but the owner was a serious gentleman and didn't even allow cursing in there. All I can picture is a bunch of drunk barflies pouring out of a bar ready to do battle, like some wacky version of that first scene in Gangs of New York. Dive patrons, assemble! Something opposite happened to me. This strange, much older guy wouldn't stop talking to me. I was in my mid-20s. I was shy, so I tried to act polite toward him, but I was visibly upset. A female bartender came up and asked if this guy was bothering me. I nervously chuckled, "Yeah, kinda," and gave her a look. The bartender laughed and said, "Leave the girl alone," or something similar to him in a joking voice, then walked away. The man said I was rude and walked away, only to come back and bother me a few more times. A couple of days later, a friend who frequents that bar said the bartender told him my story. She says I hurt the older guy's feelings and the bartender didn't appreciate it because he's kinda kooky, but a regular and means no harm. I don't go to that bar anymore. Had a bar call 911 once after they bounced a guy who was creeping out a woman. He stood outside the bar and flat out said he was waiting for her until she came out, which he did. He started following her and told people that they were together. I literally had to stand with this moron while this poor girl and her friends got into the car, and the absolute D-bag tried to stand really close so he could get the address. I told the driver her address, but gave the address of the jail, which most taxis know, and he seemed to get the hint. Guy tried to complain that we had unlawfully detained him just so he couldn't get the girl's number and address. I mean, yeah, that's basically what we did. Move along. I've actually been used to escape by a random before. Was at a local bar with a bunch of friends, and out of nowhere, a girl walks over, sits on my lap, and between teeth, clenched smile just said, "Pretend to know me." I laughed and loudly said, "Hey you, where did you wander off to?" Thankfully, my friends picked up on it because inside of 10 seconds, a few of my female friends were chatting with her, and standing between her and the guy she'd fled. I asked her after what about me made her know I was a safe person to turn to, and she said, "Because you're here with a bunch of women. Total honesty. I thought you were gay." Haha. I'm a bouncer in a nightclub. No drink safe words, but we actively keep an eye out for situations which don't look above the radar. If a girl's leaving with a guy and she looks too intoxicated to stand, I'll take her aside and ask what his name is and how she knows him. If she seems to have had something slipped in her drink, I'll call the police. If she's scared or needs help getting away from a bad situation, I'll call her a cab and walk her to it. I'll also say to the bloke that I need to see some ID because his entry stamp isn't the right one. As soon as I see it, I'll take a photo, pass it on to the police, and ban him for life from our club. We've built up a reputation as the safest nightclub in our area, which draws both crowds, especially girls. It's massively helped our business being so focused on safety. In 2012, I was at an undressed beach in Toronto. A random 60-year-old man approached me. At the time, I was a shy 18-year-old, and he simply wouldn't leave. He talked on and on about how I could come live with him at his house and be his girlfriend, all the while not letting me get a word in edgewise. To escape this situation, I decided to call the day a loss and leave, even though I'd only just arrived. As I walked back to the ferry, he emerged from the trees and followed me back to the mainland. He was still planning out our lives together and offered to buy us lunch at a local bar chain. Not wanting to lure the scary guy back to my apartment, I agreed in the hopes of stalling and figuring out a plan. We sat down at a table by the door and I said I had to go to the bathroom. And as I passed the bar, I gave the bartender, a 20-something female, the 411 on this creepy guy situation. I asked if there was a back door somewhere I could slip out of and leave without him noticing. She replied that there was one through the kitchen, but it was for staff only and she couldn't help me. I felt so betrayed that another female wouldn't intervene at all and cried a little bit in the bathroom. I was so young, new to the city and genuinely scared. I didn't even have a phone back then, I was so broke. When I got back to the table, the food came. I ate 2 bites and when he called for the check as he waited for the bill, I said, "Well, this was," and ran into the street. But I still took some crazy side treks before getting on the subway. That sounds awful. The bartender definitely should have helped somehow, or at the very least got the manager involved if she couldn't handle it. I had to use it when on a date off Tinder. We met up and he'd already got me a drink, just sitting there, a shot of something clear, and then he said to me that I should do it, then he would take me somewhere better for more fun. I wasn't comfortable, so I excused myself to the bathroom and saw a poster that said to ask for Angela if you're uncomfortable. Went to the bar and asked for Angela, and immediately this guy was playing along saying, "Oh yeah, she's working in the kitchen tonight." And he got me a taxi and walked me to the back door and into the taxi to make sure I got there without any hassle. Never saw the guy again. Are you saying that when you arrived at the bar, he had already ordered you a drink and it was there waiting for you? Yikes! I went out on my own one night and was having a few drinks at a local pub. I just moved to the area, so I didn't really know anyone. A guy sat down next to me and was chatting. At first, this was just casual, but he eventually became really tipsy and handsy. Then the guy actually kissed me just out of the blue, and I told him I was not okay with it. He said I was leading him on, which was not the case at all. He got angry and stormed off to the washroom. I was feeling really uncomfortable and unsafe. I didn't know my new neighborhood yet. The bartender saw that I was feeling off right away. He didn't even know me but could tell. He asked if I wanted to be shown out the back door and if they could put me in a cab home so that I could go without the guy following me. They even paid and apologized that I felt unsafe in their bar. I was totally blown away, and I would totally go back there and feel completely taken care of. Heck yes, bar manager. If you can't confront the guy, this is an excellent way to deal with the situation. I think most clients would even be glad at the option without the taxi fare paid for, but that's a great gesture. This is a relatively new thing, but some of us girls have been doing some form of it for a long time. Back when I was a bartender, I noticed a girl stumble into the pool table. She was crying and clearly very intoxicated. I went over to ask if she was okay, and some guy I hadn't seen her with all night jumps up and says, "I'm her boyfriend. I've got her." No, the frick you do not. We got her to calm down and give us her phone to call her roommate so someone safe could take her home. It sucks that it's necessary, but I'll always love my boss from that bar because he threw that creep out, physically. We saw her again, she didn't have a boyfriend or remember that night. Working as a bartender and bouncer for the past couple of years, I usually just try to watch for body language of people that are in the bar. If it looks like someone needs a quick escape, I'll approach and pretend I'm an old friend that hasn't seen them in a while. If they don't actually need help, I can excuse myself by saying they look like a friend. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My university town had the highest number of incidents of attempted unspeakable act for 5 years in a row. The school and community took it very seriously and implemented procedures all over the place. I asked my friend who was a bouncer at my favorite bar and nightclub, what happens when a girl orders the drink? He said it changes from week to week in the ladies' bathroom to confuse men when word gets out. You can use any of the former ones and the bartenders will jump into action. Generally, they find a way to get you away from that person, whether it be a phone call or they need to show you something. Once you're out of eyesight, they whisk you away to the opposite floor of the place. The bar is on the bottom, the club is on the top, and they keep the date occupied until you're gone. If he gets away from his company, they radio that the drink got spilled, and every bouncer abandons their post to try and keep him away from you. They escort you out the back door into a waiting cab. They pay the cabbie to take you home and make sure you're not followed. When you get home, they ask that you flick your front porch lights on and off and call the club to let them know that you're safe. They also save the security cameras from that day in case you have need of it at a later date. I never used their service because my friends were the bouncers and usually intervened before I needed to say anything. My friends did use the service though, and they said it was a relief to be in a bar that took women's safety so seriously, because in other bars in that town you could pay a bartender $20 to spike a drink. I learned the hard way to never accept a glass from someone who had their open palm over the glass. Some people are really sick. Recently happened to me. I met up with an ex after roughly 5 years of not seeing him. He seemed way off when I arrived at the bar. Forgot his wallet, not surprised, so I bought the round of beers but immediately closed the tab because I wasn't expecting to pay for him and didn't want him taking advantage. When I excused myself to the restroom, I was already regretting the evening. I left the restroom and he was standing outside the door. Every alarm in my body went off, but I just acted annoyed and questioned him. He mumbled something and walked over to a pinball machine. Never played it, just looked at it for a solid 10 minutes. Which gave me enough time to call my bartender over and ask, "Girl to girl, this guy's on substances, right?" She agreed and asked me if I felt safe. I obviously didn't, so she let me exit through the back door and even got her bar back to walk me to my car. Not sure if anything would have happened, but I'm really glad she was so cool about it. In conclusion, my ex showed up for drinks, obviously out of his mind, and the bartender helped me escape. I'm a bartender in a small town. Anytime a new woman comes into the bar, I let her know that if she ever feels uncomfortable or needs anything, to ask me to go out for a smoke with her. I've had plenty of people use it to get away from some of the usual creeps, but nothing beats the night a guy asked this girl to go home with him. After she politely refused, he grabbed her and called her the B word. We already had our eye on the situation, and my bouncer immediately came out of nowhere and tased this drunk idiot. I had a creep corner me in a bar once and tried to stroke my thigh. Then another dude I've never met before came up and said, "Hey sis, I've been looking all over for you," and he put his arm around me and walked me out. Thank you so much, stranger. It was pretty obvious that they were not working together. The nice guy walked over from a group of friends, all college-aged, and the creep was in his 50s. And when I said he walked me out, he just walked me to the door of the bar. I once got hugged by a random girl sitting at a bar who whispered in my ear, or actually talked normally, the music was loud, "Pretend to be my boyfriend." I grabbed her on the thigh and yelled, "Honey, I've been looking for you." The guy who had been hitting on her gave me the "sorry, I had no idea it was your girl" look, and then she asked me to dance. She pulled me into the crowd and we danced for like 30 seconds and she gave me a smile and left. Never saw her again, but I felt like a frickin' hero. Very small thing I did, but I felt great. Semi-related, but I was out at the pub on a campus for a show, and had been there previously in the day celebrating our last exam with some friends. Some guy who was sitting at a table next to us and trying to chat us up earlier was still there with his buddies and was drunker and braver, and of course he got me alone when my friend went to the bathroom. He wouldn't stop talking to me and getting in my face and yelling about himself, and when I excused myself to go to the bar, literally was like, "Okay, bye." He followed me to the bar and ordered the same thing as I did and offered to pay, and I said I was good and he didn't stop talking. I must have looked mad as frick because the bartender walked over and went, "Hey, you were here earlier, right? Buddy, give us a second, I need to speak with her about her tab." The guy leaves and the bartender tells me I looked distressed and asked if everything was okay. I told him I was fine, but this guy was in my personal space and not leaving. So he said that if he doesn't stop that, I should come back and order a whiskey lemon, and security would be notified and he would walk me back to my car if I needed it. We ended up moving tables, and I think he got too drunk to stand up and left not too long after that, but I was so relieved to know that the bartender was watching out. I'm not one for confrontation, and it just feels so much safer to be able to duck out with someone having my back. "I'm going to ask at work tomorrow if we could install a safe word drink policy at the bar. That would be such a great idea. Oh, follow-up. I suggested it to one of the managers and a couple of others today, and they like the idea. The next stop is getting our general manager to implement it." Not exactly a safe word drink, but some adult clubs still have an alcohol-free code phrase for the dancers that don't want to get hammered and don't want to refuse drinks. For example, "with an extra lime wedge," and the guy still gets charged for a normal drink, so he's none the wiser. Where I live, we once had an epidemic of pickup artists on every corner. There was this one guy who was incredibly persistent and wouldn't take no for an answer. When I told him I had a boyfriend, he wouldn't let me leave and said I had to give him one of my friend's numbers. Thank God a kind girl noticed what was happening and came up to us while saying, "Well, there you are. We've been looking for you. Come on, let's go. The show is going to start." She got me away from him and I was so thankful. To anyone out there, please don't ever do it. It's such repulsive and scary behavior. Well, I knew this topic would be full of gross dudes and my expectations have not really been subverted. Thankful that most of them end with these D-bags getting blown off. I'm a straight guy, and I had a girl rescue me once from an uncomfortable situation. I was at a bar with a couple of buddies, and these two girls were sitting in front of us, that none of us were even interested in, let alone said anything to them at all. They started trying to chat us all up. When asked what we do for a living, I said I was a garbage man and had kids, in the hope that that alone would be enough for them to move on. But unfortunately, no. So I must have been looking around the bar with the eyes that said, "Get me the frick out of here." And this nice girl I'd never met came by and did the "Hey you, I haven't seen you in forever" thing, and gave me a great big hug, which of course I thanked her for. She saw I was super uncomfortable and needed rescuing, so she saved me. I repaid her kindness with drinks and we met up later for a movie. Since then, I've been more aware of the signs and would help a stranger if ever the need presented itself. A guy I was with was super adamant about me keeping up with him, slamming his drinks. He would drag me to the bar and order for me, then egg me on to drink faster. I did not want to be drunk with him. He ordered me a vodka soda and I maintained that slightly pained look on my face, hoping to catch the bartender's attention. When he looked my way, I widened my eyes a little and subtly shook my head no. I watched him as he poured my drink by faking the vodka pour and just filling me with what I presume was soda water. Not normally my drink of choice, so I wasn't sure what it was. Kinda looked like stale Sprite, and he garnished it with a lime and everything. Said, "Cheers," when he handed us our drinks. This continued for a while until Drunky McSmashy Pants wanted to leave. Bartender said to me, "Oh, you'd asked about seeing Megan, right? Yeah, she's in the back. Go ahead while he closes out." I sort of hovered by the restrooms, which were tucked away, watching the bartender BS the dude for a while, and he eventually left looking all annoyed. When the coast was clear, I came out and said my thank yous, and he said, "Anytime, happens more than we care to admit." So I thought it was pretty cool that the bartenders were aware enough to pick up on the little signs and help a sister out. I guess during their conversation, he basically convinced the dude that I didn't seem into it, and he thought he saw me leave already. The drunk dude was drunk, so I guess he bought it without further intervention necessary. Not a bar, but a grocery store I used to work for had a safe word. The store did a lot of sponsorship, charities, community outreach, and other things, and in particular was a partner with a women's advocacy group. There was a product in the store that was never ever put on sale, so that if any employee was asked what the sale price on that item was, then one employee would distract the guy with customer service while she was shown the product she was looking for, i.e. brought to the store office by way of the back room. The bar never had a safe word, but we had a lot of reasons to get to action. Rough crowd, really. A couple came in, the woman had smeared makeup and both just looked super angry. The girl whispered to the bartender that he was hitting her outside. We called the police and had her come to the back as the guy just sat there dumbfounded. Cops came and put him in cuffs and he's denying it all. The manager came in to get the video for the side camera. She played it and the cops came back out and released him and cuffed her. She had tried to stab him outside and broke his windshield. Great night, and he drank free the rest of the night. I've experienced the bartender hero before. Out with a friend in DC. A guy comes up and stands way too close, introduces himself and shakes my hand way too hard and way too long. I had to actually pull my hand away and he kept the grip. I politely told him I was visiting a friend I hadn't seen in a while and wanted to spend my time with her and turned my back. He kept standing there, trying to talk to me. I again, but more firmly, told him I wasn't interested. He stayed. He orders another drink and the bartender serves him, all the way at the other end of the bar. Actually showed him his drink and said it will be over there and walked it as far away as he could. I thought that was brilliant. He got a very, very good tip from us. What was the dumbest $1 million tech idea that someone ever proposed to you? Someone tried to sell a friend a membership to the new internet. She asked me to sit in and listen to the sales guy's pitch. At the time, I was running a web hosting business along with managing a smaller dial-up ISP's networking infrastructure. The new internet was going to be built new from the ground up. All new infrastructure, but without all the stuff that makes the internet bad. The sales guy couldn't really explain how that was going to work. For only $50, my friend would get a lifetime membership. Members of the new internet could surf the old internet and enter information about old internet web pages into a form on the new internet about those old internet pages. Then the new internet could suggest pages on the old internet when members of the new internet did searches about them. The members of the new internet would get paid for entering this information on the new internet's system. So, after a while, new internet's members would start making money and recover their membership fee. Any proposal that involves description along the lines of members would start making money and recover their membership fees should immediately set off about a dozen alarm bells, no matter what it's about. So it's Wikipedia, but as a pyramid scheme? My uncle suggested I create a type of digital map that could direct you places and help you get from point A to point B. He suggested this 3 weeks ago. Original post from 2019. My favorite but dumbest was Chipotle Date, which would match you with people with similar or compatible Chipotle orders. I mean, this has potential. It does because all of the cute boys are at Chipotle. I think it's so dumb that it actually goes full circle into genius territory. All I see is untapped potential. I mean, it's so off the wall that I guarantee it will become a trending meme, and from there you'll see profits rise exponentially. From there you could branch off into other cuisines and even develop a sharing platform for the matched couples to share and rate Chipotle restaurants. From there, you could even do endorsements and perhaps even come out with your own brand of Chipotle. At that point, you're tapping into the food industry, and then the sky's the limit. Yeah, I could see this as a weird viral marketing thing for Chipotle, but not as a serious dating app. Have an opt-in for when people make online orders for single items, i.e. need a Chipotle date. Then it matches with others. It would get free publicity on the news programs, social media, etc. as something wacky. Then it quietly goes away in about a month when the gimmick fades. I mean, a lot of really stupid ideas, if done in a public enough light, can actually see an uptick in business for the entity in question, I guess. As an example of any publicity being good publicity, I'm now craving burritos because I just said the word Chipotle about 6 times. My family has a technology business, and when my mum started to learn to make apps to support the product, she made a test app first. The whole app was just one search bar that you could type any word into and it would do nothing, unless you searched loser and then it would pop up with a picture of me from middle school with a bad sunburn and braces. Thanks, Mum. To be fair, you could charge 50 cents for it and make a few $100s off curious idiots today. A friend of mine wanted me to make an app that turned your phone screen into a mirror. Not a front-facing camera, not just blacking the screen, but a literal mirror. He couldn't grasp why this wasn't possible. Also, any kind of new social media app that they can think of can be made by one person in an hour, apparently. Any attempt to create another social media app, knockoffs of popular games like the plethora of Temple Run games, an app for a smartwatch that will run in the background and periodically meow. I couldn't count the number of people I've seen who think they've come up with a brilliant new app or social media platform that will earn them the big bucks. These people tend to be in their late 40s to early 50s, around the age when thoughts of retirement and nest eggs start kicking in. It's always difficult to sit them down, look them in the eye, and explain in very kind terms that their idea is stupid and they shouldn't waste their money. I will admit that part of me enjoys that, though. I want, insert social media app, only with, insert extra function. I don't think people think those things through. Google. Fricking Google failed tremendously at creating a social networking platform. Granted, every single thing they did was as wrong as it possibly could have been, but do these spontaneous idiots honestly think they could do better? Okay, actually, don't ask that as a question, because the kind of person who thinks like this definitely thinks they could do better. For our capstone project, various faculty around campus get to put in project proposals for us to choose from. The worst freaking proposal was a Magic 8-ball type of app, but instead of a Magic 8-ball, it was a psychic dog. It was supposed to scan your dog's paw and give some kind of 8-ball-esque answer to your question. The group that got stuck with that project, I felt so bad for them, repeatedly asking for changes the night before each deadline and getting upset when it didn't come out the way they wanted. Also, they wanted to charge money for this crap app as well. It wasn't even scanning it, it was more of an animated image that pretended to scan it and generated something random. But the point of the post was more towards how badly it was managed by the client during the development. I have a buddy who is a programmer and a while back just wanted to get used to making an iPhone app and uploading to the iTunes store so that he was familiar with the process for when he wanted to do a real app. As practice, he made an app that would randomly generate a name based on census data. More common names were more common. It made it on some website's list of top 10 lazy apps and a bunch of authors started buying it. Last I heard, he'd made about $20,000 on his stupid app he uploaded for practice. Ones I've been asked to make include an app that does your taxes for you after talking about a site that does it, an app to make X, Y, or Z noises, a website to take custom butcher orders. The reason this is dumb is that nobody in the shop would know how to run it except for me, and I was one of the butchers. As per your last point, I remember there was a local pizza place that wanted to do online orders and they ended up with a website that, on submit, made a phone call with a synthesized voice to actually place the order. That way the shop didn't need to change any of their workflow, didn't need to add a computer and check it regularly. The orders came in the same way they always had. I got mixed reviews on this one, so I'll add it to the list. Back when I was in a coding program, our final project was to propose an idea and have the group vote on it and build the app. My app idea was a Yelp-like app for finding public restrooms and leaving reviews on them. Some classmates said it was a smart idea, while others weren't so excited about it. As someone with Crohn's, please somebody make this. It would be useful if you're somewhere where they're hard to find, like downtown San Diego or Times Square now that Toys R Us is closed. But there's already Flush and Sitter Squat and a bunch of others. My family friend develops apps and I always loved her stories. My personal favorite was a Green Herb breathalyzer app for your iPhone. If you're blowing into your iPhone to see if you're high, you're high. It's pretty simple. Anything that starts with, "Oh, I have an idea, you build the whole thing and then we'll split the profit." There's been a dude on my local Craigslist for years offering up this amazing opportunity. If it's been years, why doesn't he just learn to code? Is it beneath him? At what point does someone like this gain some introspection and give up? Or do they just keep telling themselves that they're a genius and everyone else is dumb? I have questions. I had a friend who had an idea for YouTube, but better. He didn't know how it would be better. Also, he had no idea about domain names, hosting, VPS, maintaining a website, designing a website, or literally anything. After he explained it, I let him down as gently as I could. That is the stupidest freaking idea I've ever heard. Unsurprisingly, it seems that the vast majority of these million-dollar ideas came from people with no idea about the market, competition, maintenance, or basic processes of creating them, mostly just telling their ideas to more qualified people and hoping it will make them rich without them having to lift a finger. True story, at a company I worked for, we had created an app that tracked each employee's time. Each employee would have to log in and click a button to clock in. We were approached by a manager of a department that wanted us to create an app that would allow the employee to log in and then click a button that would essentially click the one button the employee would have to click to clock in. Like, seriously, did you just ask us to build an application to click one button when it would be the exact same as using the other app? My head hurts after reading that. What possible purpose could an app like that even serve? To this day, a few ex-coworkers and I still talk about this. We have no idea exactly what they were thinking, but we've come up with a few theories. Of the few, we try to reason that the thought in their mind was not able to be translated into words, and the request we got was not really what they wanted. We think they wanted an app that would clock the employee in as soon as they logged in, but you can see where the logic would fail on this. Another thought was that they wanted something just for clocking in, but the software that was written that did the time management was specifically written into the main application for other purposes. Old boss runs a low-level IT company. He wanted me to develop a backup redundancy for military air traffic control software, including designing our own hardware, all because I used to be a controller. No idea how to design, build, or test hardware, no concept of military systems, designs or contracts, federal regulations, military agreements, anything. No software development background. Basically, he had an idea with absolutely no way to implement and no idea where to start. Ultimately, he ditched that idea in favor of certifying small businesses as IDOWorkHereLady compliant, and got angry that I wouldn't just give him a checklist of things to check due to the litany of federal compliance requirements that were deemed too much work to review, learn, codify, and comply with. Trash. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. MileRile's delivery service. We'll go to restaurants and deliver food to your house, or go to the store and pick up your groceries. That was my pitch to an entrepreneurial class in 1998.
What a stupid idea. There's no way anyone could make money doing that.
Well, to be fair, almost none of the delivery or rideshare apps have generated a net profit. Well, it's not about generating a net profit, it's about endless rounds of raising capital and investors while drawing an astronomical salary. Then it's off to the next one. It's a lifestyle. I once had a friend who wanted me to urgently make a full-on sports betting app in 1 week. Like, talk about choosing beggars extraordinaire. He wanted one person to make a commercial betting app to go live in 1 week. Urgently. I could all but laugh in his face and tell him to go F off. Had a guy approach me with something similar. Wanted a web application that would allow him to manage his fantasy football league. Member logins, trades, everything. When I pointed out there were already plenty of websites that do this, he explained that they used a lot of custom rules so they don't work for his purposes. This was like a month before the season started. My compensation would be being able to play in their league for the year, for free, potentially earning me a couple of $100 if I won the championship. I was like, wow man, that seems like a great deal for the amount of time it would take me to complete. Unfortunately, I'm just super busy at home doing absolutely anything else. Sorry.
An app that you could make a list in that would live update to all of your devices, so that we can have a family shopping list,
said my mum in 2018. I told her that you could use Google Docs for that and showed her how, and she goes,
"But that's not for making shopping lists."
My sister-in-law thought that I should make a business using drones to make fake reindeer hoof prints on roofs and other evidence of Santa, and when I told her, yeah, no, that's not going to work, she said, well, you should make a program that does that with a drone and sell that.
Well, you can always sell it to North Korea. They would love to bring gifts to the rest of the world.
A local line cook wanted me to make this app as a side project. Open your refrigerator and take a picture with your smartphone. The app will give you all of the recipes that you can make with the stuff in your fridge. The app itself would be amazing, if it wasn't basically impossible to build. Yeah, I want this app that scans every product in a different environment each time. The lighting, scale, and the amount of products stacked behind each other shouldn't matter at all. It should be able to recognize every single type of food, no exceptions. Can you do that for me in a few months? Way too ambitious an idea, but an original one. I think it is possible in the future with the right AI though. There are already some frameworks for detecting objects through images, but those aren't even near perfect. Oh god, there's so many, but I'll just mention one type. Every company with more than 100 employees and a non-tech-savvy boss will at some point blow away 7 figures on a branded social app or website that's going to be the next Facebook or Twitter, where millions of potential customers will certainly want to hang out and… crickets. Yeah, you're going to shut that thing down in 6 months because it's too embarrassing that your big bet social community is a buggy, boring, blatantly sales-focused ghost town. Damn, I didn't know that some of that stuff actually went through. I'm imagining some boss messaging everyone on Facebook to use their better alternative. Surely by now there's been enough time that CEOs aren't still getting these daft Oh wait, who am I kidding? Of course they are. A contest/raffle app where people would be entered to win prizes, and somehow large companies, Coca-Cola for instance, would pay us a few cents for each ticket entered. He just needed someone to put together a code over a weekend and promised me 30% of the profits. He had no answer when I asked him why large companies would pay for us to run raffles through this app. I declined his offer. I hope this qualifies because it was the most unrealistic request I've ever heard. A guy wanted to build a game engine that would incorporate all of the major game categories, FPS, RTS, Sim, Open World, RPG, and others, as building blocks and let a player create a custom one-off game session by picking which of the elements to combine into a game that would then be multiplayer over the internet. I'm not capable of imagining the code it would take to make something like this work. I can do a single-player version of this. It's called a box of Lego. Seriously, the idea is basically just Roblox. I had a Navy captain ask me to add a friend and foe column to the countries table. It took me about 2 seconds. Then he asked me to populate the fields. With what? Whether we're friend or foes with that country. Sir, I'm a contractor. That really seems like something that somebody with authority should provide. That sounds like relationship status, but it needs an "it's complicated" added to it, at least. Someone proposed to me an app for games to play while driving. They only had the vague concept and couldn't see why it could be a problem. Had a friend once who desperately tried to get me to create a search engine that would compete with Google. He's not the brightest crayon in the box. I mean, if you could build a search engine that could in fact compete with Google, that would probably be a pretty good moneymaker. Of course, that's in the same vein as, if I could fly like Superman, my morning commute would be a lot easier. I want you to make a simple mobile game like Call of Duty so I can host a tournament for my son's birthday. It's due next week. Can you do it for me as a favor, please? I was speechless. My mum wanted me to rebuild her work's website. I quoted $5,000 and got the, "Oh, we thought you'd do it for experience?" Yes, on top of my full-time job, I'll build you something for free. Someone suggested a drone delivery for food exclusively to people floating the river. Guess what we were doing when they proposed this? I'm sure the excellent cell phone coverage and birth of people who take their phones tubing with them make that service extremely profitable. Working in corporate America, we get people that think the company has the budget or engineering staff of Facebook or Google. At various points, I've been asked to build an app that replaced features of Chrome, Notepad++, SAP, and e-commerce sites with features and layouts based in ideas from Facebook rather than business applications. Google and Facebook have an army of engineers working on their products. We're not going to be replacing them on a shoestring budget, nor should we. An acquaintance once said he'd give me one of his ideas. I was curious how dumb it would be, so I asked. He said, "Like Facebook, but for sports." I said, "So, Facebook?" "Yeah, but for sports. You know, where teams can create pages and fans can talk about the team." "So, Facebook?" "No, for sports." This went on for about 5 minutes before I explained that teams and fans can already publish everything he wanted using Facebook. The same guy argued with me when I said that ideas are worthless without execution. Sure, if you have particular industry insider knowledge, your idea might have some value, but chances are we're talking about an entire business plan that generates value, not just Facebook for X. An app that would have access to your Gmail to read all of your orders. to check for price drops to get the difference. The user pays on the honor system afterwards, part of the savings. An app that would handle the writing of long tweets, but was also full-blown Twitter client. An app that would send an SMS when you lost signal. Lots of apps that just expect your app can do anything.
Well, it just has iOS allowing us to see everything the user does in other apps.
One of my classmates requested a copy of Google Chrome browser. Not like a copy-paste of Google Chrome, but a custom browser similar to Google Chrome. Dude, what was wrong with the real Google Chrome? When people wanted Internet Explorer but better, I would install Firefox and put an IE skin on it and change the icons. It looked like IE but ran like Firefox and actually loaded pages. My boss asked me to write a business plan for an Uber-like service for babysitters. At the time, there was a lot of issues with Uber drivers and violence and the unspeakable act, at least in the media. When I asked him how he planned to do background checks or informed him that usually parents want to do an interview before leaving their children, he wasn't pleased. Needless to say, the prospectus painted a grim future of our potential liabilities.
Something like this exists. It's called Chime by Sitter City. You register to be essentially an on-call babysitter for certain times.
An app that can hack everything, like in Watch Dogs. Oh, there are a bunch of dumb apps in the store. Like seriously, there's apps that claim to make your phone into a scale, and people download it.
I was contracted to build a church website, and one of the deacons I worked with wanted every single page to have different music played when it came up. The site was going to be about 20 pages. I mean, honestly, the only irrational part is that people don't stay on a page too long usually. If you had the playlist of 20 songs in a randomized queue that played while people were on the site, that wouldn't be too bad. Audio isn't too common, but I'm sure old people would love it. Huh. I like to cook, but I don't usually follow recipes. I'll just throw stuff together. My boyfriend commented once that I should make an app to save my recipes in case I want to recreate them. While his heart was in the right place, I could also just use any number of note-taking apps if I wanted to do this. I did have ideas pop into my head from the suggestion on how to go overboard with features, selecting ingredients and measurements instead of having to type them in, tagging recipes with keywords and other things, but that would be a lot of work for something I wouldn't use. When I was in college, someone asked me to write a program that would send our trash into space from a trash can. This man was probably 55. I told him it sounded like a good idea. Oh lord, I had some trashy woman propose to me an app that would be like… I can't even explain it because it made no sense. But basically it involved signals on motorcycles and having your helmet also have signals on it, and somehow this involved a mobile app? Somehow it was supposed to make riding a motorcycle safer because you had signals also on your helmet. Which is not entirely without merit, but it's not just an app. You'd need to develop a helmet that could do this, and a motorcycle that could do this, and at this point the app is not the star of the show here. Maybe the helmet and motorcycle just talk to each other and not go through your phone. But as it was proposed to me, you were meant to tap a button on your app when you wanted to signal, and I was like, that's not safer at all! My partner is a programmer, so I've got to witness a couple of stupid app pitches over the years. The one I remember quite well was some guy we met at a bar, a backpacker type, who had just arrived in town. His idea was to make an app for travelers that basically would let your family back home book some random person, I think other travelers in the area, to stage an intervention with you if your family back home felt like you needed or deserved it. Let overbearing mothers pay to have some rando do their overbearing business so you'd never get a rest while on vacation. I have two. The first one was pitched to me as a search engine or Google type of app that would help direct people to the correct website they were looking for if they mistyped or misspelled information, like Cisco Systems instead of Cisco Foods. When I pointed out that most search engines already had this functionality for free, they got upset. Second, more of a website proposal, whereby users would pay a large monthly subscription fee to view web cameras from around the world dedicated to only show a live feed of the sunset wherever it is on Earth. This was during the 2000 dot-com boom when tech money poured out of everyone's ears. What are some rules about life as a homeless person that would surprise you? When dumpster diving, if you find a pair of shoes or clothes that aren't your size, then you leave them neatly by the side of the dumpster for the next diver. Look out for each other and be good to each other. We're all struggling, so let's make it as good as we can for each other. When I was homeless, we paid for each other's food, clothes, and any other essentials if one was truly in need.
Honestly, I think most people would be surprised by how much the poor take care of each other. My family was homeless for a few months after coming to the US. Other immigrants gave us food, clothing, babysitting, informal English lessons, job leads, and most importantly, advice and guidance. When my mother, working as a house cleaner, got a chance to clean out fridges, she shared with other families with small children first. My parents never ate anything before we ate. They only ate what we didn't. There were some thieves and general bad people, but everyone knew who they were. Shady employers were much worse and much harder to avoid. A lot of businesses just exist to scam the poor and needy. It's sickening. In happier news, I found some of the other families that helped us out on Facebook a few years ago, and everyone is doing pretty well for themselves. A kid I was friends with in the shelter is a professor at a well-known college, and my parents own a business. You don't beg on someone's corner if they're already there. My dad told me about the time he had to live homeless for a week for a class. He was working toward being a Catholic deacon. He has a lot of stories from it, but the one that stuck with me was his first night of being homeless. He woke up covered in layers of cardboard with a rock on top to hold it in place. The other homeless took care of him on his first night on the streets. When I was in college, my sociology professor gave us the option of being homeless in a big city for a weekend for extra credit. I wonder if anyone ever took him up on that particular assignment. That seems like a dangerous assignment that can result in a lawsuit. He'd probably make them sign a liability waiver. One of my college professors made us drive through an ethnic neighborhood, a ghetto, and map it out. We all had to sign a liability waiver exempting any danger, including injury and death. This was not an extra credit assignment either. We had no real choice. There's a certain level of tenure where apparently you can just send your students out into potentially dangerous situations for ships and giggles then. Huh. Be wary of items given to you by other people. My cousin counseled homeless youth for a few years, and one of his favorites got sent to jail for accepting a gift of a cell phone. The phone ended up being stolen out of the owner's car and had GPS attached to it. The police found him with the phone and arrested him on the spot. My cousin was called in as a character witness to testify on his behalf. Not sure what happened after that, though. Sleep with your phone by your ball bag, so if someone tries to rob you while you sleep, they can't find your phone. You share what you have with your group. What goes around comes around. If there are a group of you, each person can stand on a different corner to beg and make far more than you would by yourself. Do homeless people normally group together? It does seem like it would be safer that way. I've been both solo and hanging out with a group. Each have their own pros and cons. Solo means you don't have to share, do whatever you want, easier to hitch, but in a group you aren't as lonely and you're safer from people who like to pick on the homeless. How are you on Reddit, dude? I've heard it's next to impossible to break free from homelessness. Tell us your story, if you will. I use a smartphone. In this day and age, it's a huge resource for being homeless. If you're lucky enough to get your hands on one, that is. I chose to leave home at 17 after an altercation with my mum. She was a tweaker. I packed a guitar and a sleeping bag and some clothes and headed for Portland. After I got there, I slept under Burnside near the Mission as my first night out. What an eye-opening experience. I played guitar to earn change for food and the occasional stay at a flophouse. Then I started hitching to change the scenery. That's a really long story. I was out for about 4 years. I'm lucky enough to have made a lot of good friends over the years, and one of them is helping me get back on my feet. Still a pain in the butt finding a job, but oh well. Respect your elders, aka don't F with the old-timers. Old-timers age-wise or homeless-wise, like who outranks who, a guy in his mid-40s who had been homeless for a decade, or a 60-year-old who had just lost his home? Usually the guys who've been there longer, the 40-year-old guy outranks the 60-year-old guy in this case, but it wouldn't be well looked upon to F with the 60-year-old guy either, unless there was some kind of rumor going around about him, and unfortunately rumors don't need much verification for the homeless community to believe them when it comes to the newcomers. I lived on the streets in Seattle in 2000 and lived in shelters and transitional houses for many years after that. I was 15 at the time and there was a pretty big homeless population there. We had some weird rules. I mostly lived on Broadway and each homeless group really had their own rules. There were also the AV-rats, who lived up by the university. They had a whole political system. People were at the top and people were at the bottom. You could also get kicked off the AV, and most of those kids would end up on Broadway. Almost everyone on Broadway was a junkie or gay. And there were the downtown kids, mostly young foster runaways or kids with mental issues. Lots of juggalos down there. So I guess we were sort of the crazy group. The big one I remember is that you always take off your shoes when you sleep, and if you sleep outside, sleep on top of your bag and tuck your shoes under it. Sometimes my bag was way too packed to pull that off comfortably, but people would take your shoes just to mess with you. They'd call the annoying or new kids oogles, but they wouldn't ever kick someone else out of the neighborhood like avrats. Just too much smack going around really to have that kind of control. Probably the most offensive thing you can do is finding out where someone else who's homeless lives. If you follow them, they'll stop and talk to you, and if you just enter a squat uninvited, well, it's really dangerous. It was respectful to pretend like you didn't care where your friends went at night. At any point, you can get uninvited too. You'll just be locked out that night. They don't give a crap about where you're staying. This isn't a pity party. Broadway is pretty small too, just about 7 blocks long. So people would panhandle right next to you all the time. If they weren't at least 2 shops away, they were probably doing it to tee you off. Or it's just their normal spot. Like I always camped out in front of this Mexican place because they had awesome leftovers. But it was absolutely uncool to sit or lie down around other homeless kids, or stand on the side of the sidewalk that the stores are on. It's illegal on Broadway, and doing that just attracts the cops. I remember asking other homeless kids to stand all the time, just because I was sick of getting picked up by the cops. Lots of theft too. No real idea of a moral code at all there. Although people would share their substances with you all the time. That way they had someone to bug about sharing back when they didn't have any cash. Later on, I lived at Tent City and still got stuff stolen from me quite often, even though they have a decent community there. Backstory time. I'd moved down to Florida with a friend almost on a whim. Had about $1,000 saved up at the time. He was going to get us out of the state and meet up with a girl who he later caught cheating on him. And I'd just recently broken up and wanted a good escape from Minnesota. After 2 months, we were no longer welcomed at our arranged place to stay, and I hadn't yet landed a job. We had an apartment lined up, but at this time I was already a few hundred short of the deposit check, which had been written to secure an apartment already. I'd already met a few people my age who were homeless and knew of an abandoned apartment complex with screened-in porches. I'd paid my phone bill 3 months in advance and had something about $120 of credit on the bill. Old candy bar phone, minimal texting and low minutes plan, but unlimited on nights and weekends. That made it pretty easy to stay in contact with people and very essential for getting a job. Came to find out later that my friend never replaced the rent check, which means I should have just stayed with him, but I only found out after one of my former roommates up there had convinced me I needed to come back and whip the boys in the apartment into shape. I paid her a full month's rent before moving out, just so she would have some backup in case her boyfriend and the other roommate had issues. Still on the lease, and Hurricane Katrina was coming. Those 90-degree palm trees. I shipped what I couldn't carry on the bus back to my place and hopped on a Greyhound. Anyway, my community's rule was, if you're trying to run away from good parents and are underage, we will make sure the police find you. This kid was 15, and after talking with his friends, we heard no reason for him to be running away. Just teenage angst. Made sure the police took him home, and I left my cell phone number in case he ran away again. Just because I was homeless, that didn't mean I didn't work 2 jobs. Would work about 56 hours a week at the gas station between 2 stores, and then did the usual selling papers on the streets in the morning. As a former homeless teen though, I will say that I was welcomed with open arms. I didn't come from a good home, and so when I finally got kicked out and ran away, kicked out at first, then when I didn't come back they claimed me as a runaway, I was shown how to get money, where and when to sleep, how to get food, and the best diners to chill at during cold nights. There's no way I would have made it myself if it wasn't for the help I got from fellow homeless people. A lot of really striking stories here. I can't get over how rampant homelessness seems in the US compared to other first world countries I've lived in, even with the people in question working more than full-time in some cases. I was 15 when I ran away from home because my mother threw a cast iron frying pan at my head. I didn't even have the chance to grab my shoes or a good pair of pants, and there were people who instantly helped me on my feet. I was able to find shelter, a tent city, by the end of the day. I was directed to 3 square meals per day, and from there, my own place and my own life. I was on the streets for a matter of 9 months. My advice: don't loan out anything you need to expect back. You don't have to make friends with people to survive. In fact, it's often better if you don't know a lot of people. Just don't behave like a butthead to anybody. You never know when they'll help out. There's no need to burn a bridge before you have to cross it. If someone is helping you out, be super fricking polite about it. A lot of shelters and programs have strict guidelines for how long you can use their programs. If you're polite, they might help you out a little beyond that, or they might use their contacts to get you in a better position, moving forward to the next step. If someone shares something with you, if you can return the favor, do it. If you're a runaway, don't take anything with you that was paid for by your parents. The cops can go after you as if you were a thief. If you have to run, then treat it like a clean break. Aim not to be homeless. It can be fun just living on the street and not having expectations, but your goal should be to get the frick out of there. Try to get your education in order, get certifications, and get yourself a job. A lot of programs are available for the homeless. Take advantage of them. Don't do substances or get drunk. I know that sounds like a written rule, but there are a lot of homeless people who commune by getting trashed together or become homeless after picking up a habit. Fricking avoid this. It's expensive, both in time and money, and most people aren't going to give you crap if you say no. And they won't give you crap if you say yes. You're responsible for yourself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My brother, who is mentally ill, was homeless on the streets of DC. He says the other homeless people got him food and forced him to eat it when he looked like he would starve because the voices in his head were telling him to avoid all food. They also made sure he had shelter and generally kept his completely helpless butt alive for almost a year. Like someone else said, I never had a problem with food. Anyway, my rules were 1. Find a group of people you can trust, that's not easy to do by the way, and stick with them. 2. Don't be the guy with the sign asking for money. Ever. If you must ask for money, state the reason why, and if someone says, "Instead of giving you the money, I'll just pay for it myself and give it to you," don't turn that down. Fricking ever. 3. People think all homeless people are on substances because that's the stereotype they're presented with. Do your best not to blend in with those people. You'd be amazed at what people are willing to do if you're making an honest attempt at getting on your feet, and you do your best to present yourself that way. 4. Don't do anything stupid to get money, like crime or doing the deed with people for money. You will regret it. And don't be a fricking rat on people who do it. That crap will get you killed. Remember, a lot of the people in your world are off the grid. 5. If you're getting nowhere in the city you're in, get out of there. There's always someone headed your way. 6. Never ever turn down a chance to do some work. Never. That may be an opportunity to get you started again. 7. Even if you're not religious, if a religious family offered you a place to stay, sometimes, if you go to church with us, but not always, don't turn it down. And don't do anything to them such as steal or rob from them. That's how reputations get started. 8. You're never too good for anything. If you think you are, that might be why you're out there to begin with. 9. Yeah, those clothes might stink, but at least you have some. 10. Americans, if you're young enough, the military may be your best option. Money, food, bed, and job, and all that you have to do is show up. 11. Stay off substances. That again might be why you're out there and could very well cost you a chance to get off the streets. I'm sure that's not what you're asking, but it's been over 20 years since I got back on my feet, and those are the things that have stuck with me. My source? Being homeless for 2 years. I was homeless for about 4 months in Las Vegas. Rules I learned in the area, keep in mind that I'm a girl by the way. 1. Don't walk around without some sort of knife because drunk, stupid people like to pick on homeless people. 2. Search each machine you can for loose change and vouchers. Also, if you spend $1 at the penny slots and need a drink, you can get free ones on Fremont Street, which is also a great source of free entertainment when you're bored. 3. If you find a friend, make sure one watches while one sleeps. 4. Make use of shelter money. In Vegas, there's a social service run by a church outfit that provides you with housing vouchers if you're one of the first 10 people in line in the morning. You can find a friend, double up on the vouchers in some places, and get weekly rental for an entire month. This is awesome during the summer when it's 120 degrees outside and you need AC and a shower. This is also cool if you find a job with a telemarketing company or something that requires you to shower daily. 5. If you get involved in substances or have a gambling problem and you're already homeless, you're pretty much destined to remain homeless in Vegas. 6. If you have food stamps, share. I once had a homeless man buy me a sandwich and it was the most humbling experience of my entire life. My backstory? Well, I was 23 and newly divorced with no job and nowhere to turn. My ex kicked me out, so I moved to Arizona from Texas. I'm originally from California, and stayed with some friends. I met the wrong kind of people and ended up on a 4-month bender with a guy we'll call D-Bag. Basically, I did all sorts of bad stuff and had no support from my family because they saw the path I was headed on and told me I needed to pull my crap together. So I was homeless in Vegas because it seemed like the land of opportunity. Once I realized it wasn't, I stopped doing substances. I got that voucher and got a job at a telemarketing place. Then, after a few weeks, I called my brother, basically ate my crow, and came to live with him. 3 jobs, an apartment, and an illness later, I was back at my mum's after 2 years. 2 years after that, I was an EMT. Then, social services became my calling. 2 years ago, I moved back to Northern California, got back into school, and got a job at a car wash. Now, I'm a 4.0 student in college, and I'm focusing on finishing 2 degrees and transferring to a UC in the next year. It's been a lot of hard work, reflection, and blind luck. Also, financial aid is awesome. I wouldn't change anything, and I'm almost 30 and I've done a lot. But the adventure continues. Basically, just keep going and eventually something will break. That's about all I've got. It's pretty gnarly out there, and I'm definitely glad I'm no longer homeless. I gave back what I can these days and am pursuing a career in social services so that I can continue to help others. What a story. I can imagine being on the streets in a place with as many tempting diversions to burn your money on as Vegas could turn into a sort of spiral of self-destruction. Well done on getting out of there, really. Homeless for 5 years here, since I was 18, here's a few I've noticed. Prison and jail culture bleeds into the homeless community. Watch your words. Words normal people get to say can have serious meanings on the streets. One example, saying the B word to someone might get you attacked. Watch your mouth or you won't last long. No one's pressing charges or calling the cops. If you get into a fight with someone, it's all he said, she said bullcrap. Everyone takes it and conflicts resolve themselves. Everyone you're around is homeless. You've got to stay in that shelter with them every night. You'll share the same public spaces that everyone who's homeless has to. You don't have a choice. Keep to yourself, don't mouth off, and don't F with anyone else, or you'll get F'd with. Your cigs are everyone else's cigs. Everyone on the street smokes, and if you've got them, you're probably going to end up sharing them. I've been technically homeless about 3 times before the age of 15, but you wouldn't be able to tell it just by looking at me or conversing briefly. Average-looking, white, 20-year-old male college student. Without explaining a ton of other stuff and including many sad stories, I'll get to the meat of the question. For my family, I remembered that we would go to the library every day for several hours at a time. It's a place where extended stays aren't particularly unusual. Additionally, you have AC, heat, internet, computer access, water fountains, bathrooms, lounge chairs, and nearly endless educating vessels surrounding you in the form of books. In conclusion, if you're ever homeless, go to the library. I was homeless at age 17, but lived in a shelter and not on the street. My experiences might vary from yours. Don't fricking trust anyone. The women in my shelter would befriend you and backstab you just to laugh at you when you got kicked out. Are there a lot of working girls in the area? Chances are some of the women in the shelter are part of that problem. Mental illness. Mental illness everywhere. Doesn't have to be severe, but there are a lot of messed up people. Be careful who you confront, especially if you're unsure of their mental capacity. Do you own things of any value? Well, better keep them to yourself, because some butthole will try to steal them and resell them. You don't mess with other people's children. Seriously, you don't know who is friends with who, and who might F your crap up. Also, don't make comments about their baby daddies if it's very obvious they have several. Touchy subject, usually. Don't steal each other's food. If you do, they will hunt you and find you. I once saw a woman have substances planted on her so that she'd get kicked out once they found out she was stealing food. I used to do Food Not Bombs in DC. We served meals every Sunday for several years and I got to know a lot of the homeless people in the city. I saw quite a bit of mental illness afflicting some seriously brilliant people. One guy would pull out photocopies of the Shroud of Turin, trying to convince us that Jesus had no private parts, and go on a rant from there. Another homeless guy once cut him off saying, "He's trying to lobotomize Jesus between the legs." The latter guy ruled. He'd quote Thomas Aquinas and lived for a pat, by which he meant a little hug. My experience taught me 2 things. The first is that the group we dealt with were often super grateful for the food we brought because it tasted good. It's sort of how I learned to cook. Had lots of vegetables and we didn't preach to them about religion. I remember one guy saying, "I don't need you to try and save me before giving me a stale bologna sandwich." The other thing is that the people we served almost never begged for money. They would quietly try to make things work. It tended to be the addicts who would beg. That said, there was this one guy who would ask for money whenever I saw him around the city, and I'd offer to buy him food. He jumped at the offer twice and went nuts at a 7-Eleven and a breakfast place respectively. He was hungry. There are some jerks in the homeless community, but there are also some jerks with homes. That's the long and short of it. I have a bunch of stories, but I'd say that if you have the time to stop and talk with the person for a minute, you can learn a lot and measure whether it's worth trying to help them out. Save every penny. Buy a tent. Put your tent next to a river. Go to the library every single day. Spend as much time as you can applying for jobs. Take the first job you can get. Keep bathing in the river and working until winter. Do not spend a dime on booze. Once winter comes, get an apartment and keep working. Apply to your local technical college and get a job in IT. Stop being homeless. It worked for me. To any road folk in Tennessee, make your way to Hippie Hill in Christiana. It's near Manchester. They will feed you and set you up with a tent or trailer to stay in until you get back on your feet. All they ask for is a little bit of help around the land. Ask for hippie or mama. What was the most horrifying experience you've ever endured in a video game? There was this game back in the day for GameCube called Eternal Darkness. Your character had sanity levels, and as this meter dropped, more and more effed up things would happen. A scream that you couldn't find the source of, blood dripping down the walls, an enemy attacks you out of nowhere and disappears as you realize it was a hallucination. The thing is, some of these things happened outside of normal gameplay. It would look like you were turning the volume down on your TV or changing the channel, or like a cable came unplugged. One of these was that it looked like you had navigated to the memory card. Remember those, and then clicked to format the card. That moment of panic, the complete horror as I thought every save and every game I'd played was being erased. That is by far the most horrifying thing I've ever experienced in a video game. Playing the first Sims game when I was like 9 years old with some friends. I covered a room in rugs because it looked neat. Turned on a fire because it was cozy. Immediately, the whole room was set ablaze like the rugs were soaked in oil. No gradual fire catching like in The Sims 2 or onwards. The parents of the family were trapped and died. The kids on the upper floor couldn't leave the building because the fire was on the way. We couldn't change to building or shopping or click any commands, not even speed up because it was banned during fires. My friends and I were horrified and had to watch them die for like 5 minutes straight, until the fire completely died out.
My first Sims game was Sims 2. The very first night the Sim moved into the new house, he decided to eat barbecue for dinner, proceeded to light himself on fire, and died because I didn't know about fire alarms.
Had 198 out of 200 Pokemon on Sapphire. My little sister wiped the save so she could play a few hours on a girl character, then got bored of it.
Ah yes, it must have felt really good being an only child after that.
The first time I killed a Peep in Roller Coaster Tycoon by drowning him in a lake by accident after deleting part of a pier. I was traumatized and put the game down for a while. I came back later and decided to be more careful. I ended up creating a roller coaster in the desert level that flew off its rails and exploded, killing all of its passengers. Needless to say, I went crazy and built a death park in the aftermath. You know what? I'm not sure that anyone who owns Roller Coaster Tycoon hasn't at some point built rides specifically to see how many people they can send flying to their deaths, how many people they can fit on a catwalk above the water before deleting said catwalk, and whether they can direct roller coaster crashes onto major thoroughfares to see whether the explosions will kill pedestrians. It wasn't just me, right? In Resident Evil 4, I was just shooting the water at the end of the pier because I thought I'd get the fish. When that big fish came up and ate me, I almost crapped myself. The other moment like that for me is the chainsaw guy cutting off your head for the first time. My first death in the game was from that. It made me drop the controller and I was shocked that it had just happened. Same game. I crapped a brick later when that dude bursts out of an oven and he's on fire and he's just gunning straight for you. Animal Crossing for the GameCube. There was a thing that let you visit a friend's town by sticking their memory card in the other slot. When you visited, it was really aggressive about warning you not to turn off the game while in the other town. Yep, that happened. It was an accident. My character when I got the game to boot up again was a changed little villager. Where once was a happy face were 2 black pits for eyes and a mouth in perpetual scream. And all of my money was gone. Turned the game off and cried in fear. Nintendo apparently did this on purpose to try and punish people who were save scumming, but all it did was scare the crap out of little old me. The climax to Dying Light, where you have to run away from all the night crawlers, volatiles. Oh my god, my heart was pounding so much. Oh man, being outside at night for the first time in that game was the worst. That game was amazing! The mission where you have to set the bombs in that building was the scariest for me. It was the first time I'd ever played with high-quality headphones. The sound in that game was really well done. Found myself hiding in corners to gather courage. Oh, and when that ghost kid thing screams at you, forget about it. Eternal Darkness on the GameCube. I'm 17 playing this while home alone on a stormy night. My sanity meter is ratcheting up. My pet cat has a habit of playing with the cables behind the TV. Enter a new room and the video drops from the screen, goes black and says, Vid 1 in green at the top. Oh my god, frick you, cat! I went to look behind the TV to fix things. Lightning. Look behind TV, cables still plugged in. Thunder. Blood-curdling scream from TV. I jump, hit my head, and I need a new pair of pants. Why? Why make me think there are problems with my hardware? Oh, to make me drop my guard and absolutely terrify me in ways I never expected to be scared. Metal Gear Solid 2 when Raiden is running around undressed and the game starts glitching. There was a part where it says not to close the TV and you should get some rest or something along those lines. It was 3 AM and I was sitting in front of the TV. I just cut the game off. I remember the part where the colonel says something like, "You've been playing the game for a long time, you should really take a break." I thought it was going to be truly necessary to save and reboot the game, since Hideo Kojima is insane. So I did. When you're a kid, you're so immersed into the game. When the game breaks the fourth wall, it really F's with your mind. I shut the game off when he told me to. Playing Resident Evil in the dark and seeing that damn dog break through the window. I can remember everything about that moment. The Crimson Heads were great. You're banging along doing your Resident Evil thing, crossing through that long mirror hallway like you've done 15 times before then, and then the zombie corpse that's been lying there the whole time gets up and frickin' sprints at you. Now you think, oh god, I've been killing zombies this whole time. The mansion's full of them. I know I'm not the only one who spazzed out a little there. At university, I would invite my friend around to play Outlast about one night a week until it got completed. For the duration of the game, I endured all jump scares stoically, solid as a rock, except one moment where my character was outside and a freaking leaf flew across the screen. Fell off my chair in fright. Since then, if it's ever windy on an autumn day, I can guarantee some smart aleck comment from my friend. Batman Arkham Asylum, the Scarecrow introduction. I thought my brother would kill me for breaking his beloved toy. Are we talking about the moment when the game glitches and makes you believe it's started over, and you've lost all your progress up until that point, which was basically about half to two-thirds of the way through the game? If so, then yes, the developers really knew how to put the fear into the hearts of gamers for a second. I played it on PC and was literally fumbling around to find the reset button on the front panel under my desk when the video started. I was sitting there somewhat dumbfounded as to how a PC game could reboot like a console, when I finally figured out what was happening. Freaking brilliant, and I totally fell for it. Yes, the narrator remembers sitting on his brand new custom-built gaming PC doing a Wii gaming marathon on the brand new Batman game and thinking that his rig had suffered a catastrophic shutdown. Yes, the biggest thing the Scarecrow could scare a gamer with was the idea that their machine was dying. My sister unplugged my Battlefront 2 save file when I was saving to the card and it got corrupted. She wanted to watch TV. I had hundreds of hours of stats on that account. I'm still not over it. It's treason, then. Max Payne, where he has the hallucination with the baby crying and his wife screaming, still gives me nightmares. I had to mute that part until I passed it so my parents wouldn't come out and be like, "What the frick are you playing?" My first shiny Pokemon was a Graveler. It used Explode. I've heard a story from someone who had observed the unluckiest person in existence. They encountered 2 shinies in a row, both Graveler. Both self-destructed, they are also the reason I will always have a good supply of Quick Balls. When you're playing Medieval 2 Total War and the Mongols or Timurids show up for the first time. Crusader Kings as well. A good late-game horde in that game can frick up people in the safest of areas. First playthrough, no idea what was going to happen. I chose Georgia. I was having a great time and really felt like I was getting the hang of the game. The first time I encountered a witch in Left 4 Dead. Frick that crap, man. I've never been more terrified in my life. The mannequins in Condemned. I've been saying for years that Condemned is the scariest game I've ever played. I think it's because it's not monster horror, it's real tension, and actual people scaring the crap out of you, hearing screams and heavy breathing in a dark room from some cracked out tweaker, and then seeing a chair fly past you from a room you know you have to go in. That crap is scary because it could be real. Then amplify it by the fact that you almost never have a gun, just melee weapons that you pick up. I love the game, but could only play through it once. The first moments when you step out of the bathysphere in Rapture, after a splicer has cut some of the metal, and the only thing you're holding is a damn wrench. Terrifying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Alien Isolation. Medical Bay. When a person sends you to look for something in an area where the alien is actively searching for you, you can't just hide and wait for it to go away. It won't go away. It waits. For you. It took me a month to beat that part. And then the hive level. It took me more than a year to beat Alien Isolation. 10 out of 10, recommend. Because the alien learns. It found out I liked to hide in those computer cards, and it always searched them when it entered the room. Though my scariest moment is when I found out it can chase you in the vents. It was after me, so I ducked into one and made a 90-degree turn. I thought I was safe until I heard a fast bang, bang, bang. And as I turned around, it was just barreling down the vents at me on all fours. I nearly passed myself. I bought that game and I couldn't get into it at first because the plot is so slow in the beginning. But eventually I got determined and made my way through the slow first act to get to the xenomorph, and I was glad that I did. One of the best games I've ever played and one of the most rewarding experiences in gaming I've ever had. Now I actually kind of appreciate the slow first act because it's trying to get you on edge, the same way the movie did. It's a slow burn, which is something we aren't used to in games. We want instant gratification, and that's not what the original movie was about. Outlast Whistleblower. When the last villain almost succeeds in cutting off your private parts with a circular saw so that he can commit the unspeakable act against you in the wound afterwards. I'm not kidding. Holy crap, that happens? What are you sick people doing playing these sorts of games? I'm used to descriptions of awful real-life events that we can't properly describe in these videos, but I was not aware that people were subjecting themselves to first-person simulations of this kind of thing. As another commenter aptly writes, "Excellent. I now know what game series I never ever want to play." First time playing the site recon mission on XCOM. I sent my A squad. Mistake number 1. I took note that chrysalids came from the sharks, but didn't realize they came from every dead shark on the level. Mistake number 2. I figured I had to turn on the beacon, and after I made it back to the ship, the airstrike would happen. Mistake number 3. So imagine my surprise when the timer for the airstrike pops up after I turned on the beacon. I panicked, and with chrysalids coming from behind us and popping out of dead sharks ahead of us, it was a slaughter. Everyone died, including Big Mama Simbra Legitho, a heavy from Zimbabwe that had a 94 in aim and had well over 100 kills. The worst is when Shepard says that even though everyone died, the mission was a success. Go F yourself. I still won't play that mission just because of the hatred and PTSD I have from playing it. Frick chrysalids and frick that mission. Probably the entirety of Dead Space 1. Just saying, that crap effed me up. Seriously, man, I purposefully played it with the lights off. My younger days weren't the brightest. Going down that ladder in the first Fear game. Not the scariest moment in gaming, but it was my first horror game. My now ex-friend deleted my Pokemon save and restarted with Bulbasaur. I only needed Growlithe and Arcanine to finish the Pokédex. I was 8 when I got Ocarina of Time. Those fricking zombies you have to get past to get to the Sun Song and leave the Temple of Time as adult Link have scarred me to this game. How about dead hands in the bottom of the well and in the Shadow Temple? Any difficult section in a game with unskippable cutscenes before it. The Seymour battle in the mountains, Final Fantasy X, was this for me. Fricking Unalesca. How about frick any Japanese game for this exact reason? Playing games with my son, who's 8, and we're playing Rocket League. I always try to give him a chance to win, until a couple of weeks back. He's up 2-1, and I haven't been easy on him, and as time dwindles away, I'm busting my butt, doing my best to tie the score. I always keep it close, but sometimes I let him win. Sometimes I win. The kid's got to learn how to take a loss, you know? Except, I can't score. The little guy's saving shots, keeping the ball away from me, I'm missing hits, everything. He wins 2-1. He's all smiles, does a great job treating the win like a loss, meaning not running his mouth or anything. On the outside, I'm smiling, having a good time, but on the inside is a mixture of frustration, proudness, and general what the frick-icity because this is it. The beginning of the end. I'm not sure if this counts, but many years ago, geez, I'm old, I was at the top of the case ladder for Duke Nukem 3D. I log on one day to find I was number 2. I'd only been number 1 for 3 days and I'd not gotten any challenges, so I should have still been number 1. When I contacted the ladder admin, he said I'd ignored a challenge since the rules state you can ignore a challenge only once, and you must play at least 1 match per week. I hadn't broken any rules, but it didn't matter to him. So I challenged the number 1 guy, beat him, and then he accused me of cheating and the admin sided with him. Turns out the admin was the number 1 guy. The water part in AmITheA Dark Descent. The first time my friend and I tried to play this part, we were taking shots because liquid courage. Unfortunately, the more we drank, the scarier it got. Vault 11 in Fallout New Vegas. The one with the sacrificial chamber under the Overseer's office. Probably my favorite side quest storyline of any game ever, and I don't think there's anything even linking to it. I just stumbled upon it randomly. The vault in Fallout 3 where it's just full of dudes that say, "Gary," scared the crap out of me back in the day. Not sure why, it was just uncomfortable. The first thing that sprung to my mind is the hotel basement in The Last of Us. Up until that point in the game, you've never not had a partner or two, and then suddenly you're alone in a pitch-black pit full of monsters. But that aside, the real answer is the entirety of PT. It's a horror classic, and it's an absolute travesty that it's no longer available for download. Playing the original Diablo, and no lie, I was about to kill Diablo when a loud thunderclap occurred and shut off my power and PC. Shout out to the butcher in Diablo 1. When you open the door full of dismembered bodies and entrails everywhere, and that big mother fricker yells, "Fresh meat," and runs at you. I was like 5 or 6 when I played that, and I'll still always remember it. Haha, first time I opened the door and heard, "Fresh meat," I left immediately and was like, hell nah. The big red monstrosity is responsible for too many hours of fear and frustration in my childhood. Recently, the narrator went back and faced his fears and struck the beast down at last. He then downloaded the Beelzebub mod and went straight back to being fearful and frustrated about him. That part in Dead Space 2 with the laser in the eyeball. Cringy crap right there. Honestly, anything eye-related makes me freak out. It's as if my eyeballs don't want to see their kin being slaughtered in any way. I just squinted my eyes really hard after reading this. When I was in middle school, I got Myst for my DS. It's totally silent except for possible machines you turned on or clues. In one building there were these books. You open them, and there are screens inside with fuzzy moving images of people talking in creepy, old radio-like voices. Nope. I didn't endure it, but my little brother told me about the time when a friend of his was looking over his save files for his PlayStation. He looked at an over 300-hour, almost maxed-out save file of Final Fantasy IV and hit a button. "Do you want to delete the save file?" My little brother tensed up and said very carefully, "Whatever you do, do not select yes." The friend said, "What, yes?" and hits random buttons, and the save file is gone. I cringe and shudder just thinking about it. We don't go to Ravenholm. You know, it's weird. Horror games don't bother me, but Ravenholm? There's something about that level that just sets my teeth on edge. I think it's because the game, Half-Life 2, is grim bright, but that section is both grim and dark. When I was 11, Halo Combat Evolved came out. I don't play horror games and didn't expect anything like the Flood was going to pop up. It creeped me out a bit, and how closed in the library level was a bit scary to 11-year-old me. My little brother saving over my almost complete game file in GoldenEye. This was what also taught me to keep multiple save files just in case. In The Sims 3, my sim was staying at someone's house for too late, around 2 AM if I recall correctly, so the game tried to make a nearby sim shoo my sim away so he'll leave. There were adult Sims on the lot, but for some reason the game bugged out and a baby tried doing the shoe animation, which made it just look like the freaking alien from Alien Isolation. Pretty much all of BioShock. When you walk into that dentist's office and it gets all foggy, and then he's right behind you just staring at you when you turn around. That or the shotgun on the floor in the pool of light. You know it's a trap, but gosh darn it, you need that shotgun. Or those freaking ballerina statue things placed everywhere, and you find an upgrade machine in a small, dimly lit, flooded room, and when you finish upgrading, you turn around and there is a statue there that wasn't before. I immediately ran up and started beating the statue with my wrench. It didn't die, but it bled everywhere. That let me know those things were alive. Sonic 2006. Just the entire game, really. I played Half-Life 2 for the first time and I didn't know anything about it. Then Dr. Kleiner's head crab jumped right at my face and I'd never been so frightened over a video game. It was Lemmings, or possibly Lemmings 2. Anyway, I was out 1 pixel in my digger's position and the whole troop fell from one platform into a burning pit of oil on the platform below them. It was all over before I could hit the explode all option. I felt so ashamed. When I was playing Left 4 Dead split screen with a friend and we encountered what we dubbed the hardcore insane tank. So the tank is an incredibly buff, gorilla-like zombie that tries to steamroll you. But this tank was different. He swung us around, then he ran away. Then he came from a different direction to punch our teammates. He kept doing this. He kept hiding and ambushing us, and no matter what we did, he just wouldn't die. Keep in mind that this was offline and not at all how a tank is supposed to act. So we just decided to bail and hide in the safe room, the starting point on the map. It has an unbreakable iron door. We closed the door and he just busted right through it like the Kool-Aid Man. I didn't even know this was possible, so you can imagine our reaction. I'm pretty sure it was a bugged tank, but my god, the tension was real. Never encountered anything like it again. Accidentally killing my horse in Skyrim. Kept my horse's meat in the chest in my first house and never bought another horse again. Then I ported to Whiterun and my horse was in the stable. So confused but relieved my horse was alive. Brought it with me to Kinsgrove and it got roasted by the dragon there. I hate my life. Rest in peace, Clip-Clop Doggo. I had a Final Fantasy VII save where I was planning to get all the characters to level 99, including her. I had about 20 hours into it, my friend came over and we played the game, and I took the controller from them when saving so she wouldn't save over my game. Then I saved over my game. Alien Isolation. I'm so near to the end, as far as I know, but it started giving me the fear, and I honestly can't play more than 15 minutes at a time before I wig out and quit. I've been playing horror games since the year dot, but this is the first one I just can't deal with. Crap, I couldn't even get as far as encountering the alien before quitting the game. Creative Assembly hit me right in the spot with my fears to make it too spooky for me. I can't think of any other game that's done that. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.